This is another Infosol production.
Hey everybody, welcome back. How's everyone doing today? Hey John, hey Tamika, hey Rihanna, thanks for joining us. What's going on?
Hey everybody.
Just looking forward to today's panels.
Looking forward to today's panel. Everyone who's out in the world out there, welcome back to part 2 of This Business of Cannabis, the Masterclass produced by the Hudson Valley ADC, Season Gives, Awaken.Space, Women Grows, one of the producers on this event. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back. Today we have a really power-packed day. Remember, you can watch part 1 wherever you're watching it now. There it will be there, and we're going to leave it up there so that you can go back and get all this really great information. Anything you want to give anybody a little sneak peek on what they're going to get today, John?
Well, we have a really great panel on product development and formulation with a few makers from the city here in Hudson Valley. I think Tamika's moderating that panel. We have another one on cannabis technology. We're going to hear from the Hudson Valley Cannabis Industry Association, as well as the New York City Cannabis Industry Association. And then we're going to wrap up with a really exciting panel on dispensaries and retailing, which I think is appropriate because, correct me if I'm wrong, the Office of Cannabis Management just put out guidelines for their adult use conditional cannabis dispensary program, right?
Yes, they did.
Yeah. So we could talk a little bit about that when the time comes, but that dispensary group is going to talk about, the ins and outs of setting up a retail operation. So it's a lot of good information today.
It's really exciting. I think without further ado, because we have such a information-packed agenda, that we should go right into everything that we have to do today.
Okay, very cool. Brianna, you just want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Hi,
and then we'll jump right in.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. I'm Rihanna Young, and I'm the founder of Happy Hound CBD, a vegan CBD dog treat and tincture company. And we've seen that, humans have been using CBD, and it's time we give that same care to our pets. So I'm excited to be here.
Okay, very cool. And she's actually part of the next panel. So we are going to jump right in to our product formulation panel. See you in a bit.
Fossil Rod.
This is an original instrumental.
The product development portion of the segment. We are here with several phenomenal panelists. My name is Tamika Dunkley. I am your host for today. We're here with Rihanna Young, with Miriam Farrer, and with Amy Stein. And I'm going to jump right into their bios. For Miriam, her path to wellness has always been plant-based. The daughter of a campesina Sabena, immigrated to New York City, she learned as a young girl that soil provides for everything, whether in her family's urban garden in Queens or in a thriving farm in the Dominican Republic. She watched her mother and abuela create healing tinctures from plants they brought from back from the islands. And she has held these time-honored remedies close to her heart as she went on to study fine arts and design and embarked on a successful career as an art director for top beauty brands in Manhattan. It was a combination of motherhood, which gave her new purpose, and a twist of fate that led her back to the restorative powers of plants. While on vacation, a car accident left her with debilitating back pain and diagnosis of spinal arthritis at age 49. Intolerant to pain medication, pharmaceuticals were not an option for Miriam. She began to plant and herbs in her community garden, became a medical marijuana patient, and started to learn good from the healing properties of herbs and cannabis. From there, her body began to heal and her vision of herb as body care took root. Herbus plant-based CBD body care grown and made with love in New York City was born. Janelle Ryan is a premier physical therapist, founder, and pioneer. at the forefront of Amy at the forefront of threatening the pelvic floor dysfunction and pelvic pain, specializing in functional manual therapy for all people, including children. In addition to being the founder of Beyond Basics, Amy has served as the president and is currently the advisory board of International Pelvic Pain Society. Amy lectures internationally and has been featured in documentaries and interviewed on critically acclaimed TV shows like Dr. Oz, ABC 2020, and Good Morning La La Land. As an award-winning author, Amy has written a book on pelvic pain, healing pelvic pain, and endometriosis, Beating Endo, How to Reclaim Your Life from Endometriosis, and created a video on pelvic pain, healing pelvic pain and abdominal pain. Amy is also a co-editor and Healing in Urology, as well as featured author in many medical textbooks, including Pelvic Pain Management, Female Sexual Pain Disorders, Evaluation and Management of Sexual Dysfunction in Men and Women, and the Overactive Pelvic Floor. Her award-winning books and videos help people heal from pain, improve function, and take back their lives. She is a tireless educator, advocate, and works closely with patients, caregivers, and healthcare providers everywhere to raise access and awareness so more people can get care needed. Amy recently founded her own line of healing CBD products, Wellness and Nature, that aims to further assist and inspire those on the mission to good health and healing. Rihanna Young, founder of Elevated Infusions and Happy Hounds CBD, both wellness companies offering healthier alternatives for relief from anxiety and pain for humans and pets, respectively. Rihanna began her entrepreneurial journey in 2020 when she noticed people and pet owners looking for natural, transparent, and nutritious products to help themselves. In response, Rihanna created Elevated Infusions as a pickup and delivery service throughout New York City to give consumers a gourmet edibles experience. Shortly after that, she developed a complimentary line of natural pet treats and tinctures with CBD. Since launching it in early 2021, Happy Hounds has been found on the shelves of select pet, CBD, and health food stores across the 5 boroughs. Pop-up shops and order online. The company has a website and social media channels. That is really some phenomenal work that you guys are all doing. And I think you all have a phenomenal story. So I'd like to jump right in and ask you, what made you get into this industry, in the cannabis industry? And we could start with Rihanna.
Yes. So, I grew up in LA, surrounded by cannabis, just knowing about its transformative effects on people's lives, and, just never understanding the stigma, because in my lifetime, it was basically, medically legal, but it really was transformative. From even a young age, I noticed how it made me feel, but also others around me, and how it countered some of the other negative things that you could be doing. So it really has been a part of my life ever since then. And when the pandemic hit, I kind of looked around and I said, where can I really have the most impact right now? What's really happening where I can really help people on a different level? And that's how it started.
So definitely values and mission based. Amy, it sounds like you have a very similar experience with a huge impact on the medical field. So can you tell us more about that, please?
Sure. Thank you for having me on, by the way. This is really exciting. So I started treating pelvic health, and it kind of just fell in my lap decades ago now. And I saw a void in the healthcare system with pelvic and women's health and all bodies related to abdominal pelvic pain. And then it has advanced, definitely. Like, there are more physicians and healthcare providers that understand pelvic health conditions. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about bladder issues, bowel, sexual dysfunction, irritable bowel syndrome. So things that we're all familiar with. And then, especially during the pandemic, I was seeing a void of wow, this is really affecting a lot of people in various ways. Medications don't always help our patients. And there was a void that I was seeing that could be helpful for our patients. So I reached out to John, and he helped me to create products specific for abdominal pelvic pain and pelvic health conditions in all people. And I've found, and my patients have found, that it's extremely helpful. There is still, we still have a long way to go with regard to CBD products, as well as pelvic health, but we're getting there slowly but surely, thanks to all of you.
It's such a, I'm a registered nurse by trade, and it's such an untapped area. You know, there's so much stigmatization in that area. So really kudos to you in doing that, that work and helping in that way. Because especially when it comes to the gut and the belly, people don't realize how toxic a lot of these traditional pharmaceuticals are. So it's awesome. And Miriam, what about you?
So I had many reasons for coming into the space. I knew I wanted to be in this space a long time ago. I studied art and design, and I remember saying to myself when I was 21, I'm 52 now, I'm going to be in this industry one day. And, you know, like many women, I dated men in the legacy market. That was really my introduction to the space. But years later, fast forward, I'm a mom, I'm gardening with my local community, and I realized I'm growing all these incredible anti-inflammatory herbs. And at the time, I was an art director at L'Oreal, creating brands. I was their skincare art director. So I wanted to create my own product. You know, eventually I started making my own product out of the herbs I was growing in my garden, and added CBD. And I had a friend who, interestingly enough, I now have spinal arthritis, but she was diagnosed way before me and was taking way too many pills. And I was already kind of navigating the New York space. My husband's family lives in Colorado, so I was very aware of the legal market. And I shared this product I made with her, and she shared it with a friend and another friend, and it kind of spiraled. This was in 2016. I made a plant-based solve, and being in the industry, I just got on a mission to get people off pills. I love plants. I think it's much more than CBD. It's healing naturally is just opening us up into a whole other world. And that's really why I'm in this space, to get people off pills.
That's amazing. That's wonderful work, everybody. So where does somebody begin when interested in making products? We can follow the same format if you want, or anybody could take that question.
I'll jump in. I mean, I kind of started, I started making them myself. I want to tell people, you have to love what you're doing. You can't do this. You can't be in this space for money only. You have to love what you do, and you have to love what you're making, and you have to really believe you're making something to heal people. You know, there's a lot of CBD brands, a lot of brands out there that are just for the money, and it's a different experience when you experience those brands. One, you have to love what you do, but to start, you have to learn everything there is to learn about cannabis, hemp, CBD, not just formulation. You have to understand the legal side. You have to understand the history. You can't just be a brand in this space. You have to be an advocate. You have to work for destigmatization. So it's all hand in hand. I mean, anyone jump in here, but I that's kind of where I started. I didn't start in, and maybe I was naive coming from a big brand side. I didn't start this at formulation and with a lab. I started this in my kitchen and in my garden.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I started in my kitchen as well. You know, just playing around, messing around, trying different things, infusing, and a lot of mistakes, a lot of tears, a lot of, oh my gosh, I wasted so much weed. But you know, you live and you learn, and it makes you better. And, you know,
Mm.
especially when you get to that better level, the bigger level where you go to someone else, you go to a manufacturer, you really want to have that ground, that foundational knowledge of saying, okay, I know what this will do. I know that this adding, you know, you want to have your own understanding also to protect yourself. I think it's a good thing too.
So I really appreciate you guys because I'm actually in the learning process still of CBD. So again, coming from a pelvic health background decades ago where I saw that there was such a void, then I saw exactly what Miriam was talking about, the pills. And in the beginning of my career, I did see a lot of opioid use, and it was very distressing because what I found with those patients is I couldn't get them to where they wanted to be. And now I'm seeing how, and I'm learning how CBD and THC can help that patient population specifically. And as we know, that it's the opioid crisis is still out of control. It got worse during the pandemic, and I saw that there was such a need. I don't have as much experience as you guys starting from the ground up. So I went straight to John, and he introduced me to various people to get me started. And I saw with my patients how I have a salve, a tonic, and a lubricant. And really my goal was the salve and the lubricant, but then I learned how the tonic can help as well with the gut and everything else and sleep. But you really need a team, and I'm inspired by you guys starting from the ground up because I still feel overwhelmed 2 years into this and just
It doesn't stop.
But I agree. You have to have a passion, and you have to really be doing this for the right reasons, because that's where it comes from. And my goal was just to help my patients even more. Like, what else can I give them? I know the medications, they do work for some, but for a lot of our patients, they don't help. So I saw that lack of that void, and I wanted to help my patients and everyone else if I could.
So on that note, that's all great information. On that note, what licenses have you guys had to get, if any, especially if you have multiple different types of tinctures and salves and things that are taken orally or topically? Are there any special licenses that you've had to get?
Yes. This year, I think I have a hemp retailer's license, and my CBD is farm CBD oil and lotion are farm direct. So my farmer, I have all the certificate of analysis, all the labs, all the lots. He is a licensed, so I have his license. I have my license. I also, because I'm an LLC, have a doing business as for my trademark. So all of these things are kind of in the past year. You had to have the retailer license. So it's definitely getting more defined as a space, and it's much harder to be like homemade and handcrafted.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. For our pet treats, you know, since they are not currently regulated by the FDA, we do not have any licensure on that other than the New York State Pet Food Registration. And for our products, we're in that window. You know, they haven't given us the ability to apply for a manufacturer's license, but as soon as we can, we're jumping on that.
And mine, I'm similar, that I have a retail license and an LLC, and I made sure manufacturers, the COA, the certificate of analysis, were all there, because I was in my research, I saw that I think it's something like 70% of CBD products are mislabeled, so it's really important to get that certificate of analysis. So yeah, but I think that there's still a long way to go. I'm seeing, and I know that in New York, I think we're all based in New York, that they're starting the THC products, which that seems totally overwhelming too.
I think
but
I think they released the conditional manufacturing license yesterday. So Rihanna, you might want to look at that.
I think it was for CBD or it was for both.
No. They released manufacturing yesterday. So it's the legalization has put more restrictions on CBD. That's what's happening right now. And I'm definitely feeling it. Your packaging has to have different mandates on it. Everything's shifting. Like we're in a shifting mode right now.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you guys at every stage are so knowledgeable about the legalities, about the ins and outs. What were some helpful resources that you found in navigating?
I just started attending industry events, trade shows. My background's government and politics, so I'm used to just networking a lot. And that's really what I decided to do. I went to New Jersey. I went to the CWCB Expo last year, but then this time with Women Grow, which was a huge, big deal, and was really a wonderful experience. And I never thought we would be able to vend there this soon. So it really connections, going to events. I went to one event with the New York Processors and Growers Association, which led to another event the next day where I met Women Grow. So it's not just you go to one event or you go to one industry event and have, you make your good connections. You never know who knows who, what will lead to what, how someone can help you. And I always say, networking vertically. Everyone's so into, can I find the highest level person to talk to? And sometimes you get the most resources and information from people in similar boats as you, or even, doing a little bit more, and you can learn a lot from them. But I would say get out there and start talking to people, start talking about your company, your products.
I agree. I second that. And I mean, I've been doing this. I showed up at a Women Grow meeting in 2016. I was kind of curious in New York. I literally called Women Cannabis New York, and that Women Grow came up, and I just started showing up at every event, and every event leads you to another event or some other educational platform. I didn't show up with the intent of launching a business. I showed up with the intent of helping people launch their brands, design packaging, branding, logos. And I actually did that in the beginning. And then through another event, I realized I could launch my own brand. So I 100% agree with what Rihanna said. You have to show up. You have to show up for yourself. You have to keep showing up for your brand, but you have to be smart about where you show up. In the beginning, the first 4 years, I showed up unconditionally everywhere. Now it has to be on my mission, and really I'm trying to be in my community, so I like to show up in my community more than any place. So as you evolve, you have to be more strategic about where you show up.
I agree with that. And I keep going back to the pelvic health because that's where my origin came from. And I was similar with the pelvic health. I was going to like everything. And then I realized, you know what? They don't want to listen to me. They're not hearing me. So I'm just going to, stop trying with the particular group that's not willing to listen or change. I think the same is true for CBD. And, also, you're targeting your market is really important with CBD, and and I think just having a team, or even starting from the ground up, depending on what your vision is, I think that's important too, to establish your mission and vision from day one.
Even when you're starting from the ground up, you establish that team too. So having like-minded people around you, even as you guys had said, just showing up and being in that energetic field is so important. So that's amazing. So how do you guys produce your product now? We've touched on it that you guys had started out, so a few of you had started out in a home kitchen. How are you making the products now? Or how would somebody go about making products?
Yeah, so I started in my kitchen. I now have a supplier and formulator I work with on my treats for dogs and cats and the tinctures as well. I have a supplier. Everything is made in New York, and all of my packaging is made in the US. I wanted, especially right now, starting a business, I want to keep it in America and, keep, especially in New York, as much as I can. But yeah, no, starting out, I would say you got to go talk to people that own manufacturing facilities. And I would always keep multiple manufacturers in your pocket because you don't know when one can not fulfill or not do what you need them to do. So I would go and I would ask to tour the facilities and really see what they do and see what they've done for other brands.
For me, it's a combination. I still handcraft some products. I don't just do CBD. I do a couple of plant-based rituals and other things. I make infused flower waters. I do other botanical things apart from CBD. So I did that strategically. I knew I had to have some products that were manufactured that retailers could order in bulk. And so I did farm direct. And like Rihanna, made in New York has always been important to me. And sustainability coming from a big beauty company, I actually geek out on sustainability and packaging as a designer. That's very important to me. So everything had to be made in New York, sustainable materials, which isn't always economical for a small brand, but if it's part of your mission, you make it happen. But I work with a farmer upstate, and I white label. I white label 2 products from them to make it much easier to get products to my consumers. Then I have products that I still make myself and then products that I source. So it's a combination. And I kind of came to that during COVID because pre-COVID, I was just doing pop-ups. And then when I had to go online to get through the hurdle of selling CBD online, I had to get creative. And that meant selling more than CBD. So you have to be creative in that sense. But growing with the farmer I work with is also part of my plan and part of their plan. As they are able to customize, I will customize my formula with them. So it's everyone in this state is kind of evolving, even the farmers. Right now there's a big evolution going on in the state, and I've been working with them since they started. So it's a nice growth for me that as they develop, I develop.
So, go ahead.
That's okay. I agree with that. I am also New York based, so manufacturing, labeling, trying to keep it all within the state. And I did want to go back to the question prior because I've been working closely also with a medical marijuana physician who has helped guide me along the way, who has helped educate me. We've been working together for years and years, and then he helped me talk me through the CBD and the effects on pelvic and abdominal pelvic issues specifically. And then basically what I did was I took the CBD and I really tried to gear it towards my patient population. So I worked with the chemist and we added certain botanicals, Solomon seal, kava, which helps, I'm sure you know, Miriam, kava, and willow bark, which helps with nerve specific irritations and pain. And so that's how I created my products with the chemist, because I'm not the expert at all in the chemistry part of it. So yeah, it was an experience. It was really exciting to be able to put that formula together to specifically help the patients that I see.
It's so specialized and customized. And I really appreciate that you guys are growing in this industry and growing with other makers, manufacturers, growers. So how do you guys source? Amy, you had mentioned multitude of other additives that you enhance the product with, but how do you guys source your raw materials? How do you go about making sure that everything is on the up and up?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I work with the chemist. Again, I'm not an expert in the manufacturing part, and even the botanical portion I've learned from integrative healthcare providers and what helps with what. But I definitely am fairly dependent on the chemist in that respect. And she outsources the botanicals to organic sources. She's very organic based. So I really trust in her. So having that connection with someone has been really helpful and supportive for me.
Yeah. So in terms of sourcing my materials, I actually met a supplier through a family friend at a barbecue. And we started talking, and I visited the facility in Brooklyn, and I really liked what I saw. I liked the quality, and the bakery was over 100 years old. And so, when it comes to, you have to look at people's track records. And I always say Google, Google, Google.
Mhm.
And that really helped narrow that decision down. And for elevated infusions, that was for the pet treats. For elevated infusions, I really have suppliers that I like, that have really good product. And I would say, start looking at like restaurant depot like type, if you were trying to get into baking, into gummy formulation, things like that. Just get a really good cookbook. And then you can kind of understand the basics. So when you get to that next level, you have the basics, and you know what you want. At a different level, you're going to have to change things. You're going to have to say, okay, that doesn't work when I'm making X amount versus a smaller amount. But these are all kinks that you can work out and work through. And once you're there, it flows, right? It flows. It can be difficult, but it flows.
I source everything organic. I actually started making my product with herbs that I grew. So it was all items I made. I grew myself. So then it was sourcing them organically. Again, East Coast, but I confess I work with a farm, an amazing herbal supplier out in Oregon. There's amazing plant and herbal suppliers, not just all my CBD is New York, but like raw material herbs in bulk. I do get things from Oregon. My background, I'm my parents are like farming herbal people. I grew up with herbs and plants, and that's just something that comes naturally to me. I'm a plant geek, and then throw in like a design packaging person who was in the beauty industry. I know where to manufacture things, how to manufacture things. I worked with packaging engineers, with product development people. I know how to do this. I must have been crazy doing this by myself when I was used to working with teams putting out brands. So it's been an interesting experience manufacturing on my own. But I've learned constantly. I'm just obsessed with herbs and learning. The sourcing is always organic, local. The farmer I work with, again, I found him, Google, the University of Google. Google is your best friend in business today. I needed organic CBD, New York, and when nobody would sell you a gram, they would. So again, partnering with people who are willing to grow with you is so important. I found a manufacturer for an oil that I met through my beauty industry days that can scale up one of my oil formulas out in Jersey. So it's an evolution, because a formula you make in your house then has to go to a chemist, and then it has to go to the manufacturer, because you can't scale up a homemade batch into a batch. Like your first batch has to be, the formula has to be created by a chemist. So it is a process. And it's a costly process. Let's say what it is. It's not easy to do this. So be patient. You have to be patient. Don't try. Do what you can when you can, and know that if you stick to it, you will evolve to that place.
Yes, and also finding multiple manufacturers as
Yes.
back, especially as you grow and you expand. You want to make sure that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. As a co-packer, it's really important to make sure that you hold them accountable for the quality as well. This is a
And
new industry.
making local. I think Amy said producing in the USA, like during the pandemic when the shipping containers were like delayed, I had to meet my farmer mid-state at one point to like literally take boxes out of the trunk and ship them because the jars from China were not getting here. So you have to pay attention to every part of your supply chain because you don't know in today's world what's going to happen. My suggestion, if you're in North America, try to source all your componentry, everything in North America, whether it's in Mexico, Canada, just keep it on the continent you're in. That's what the big companies do.
Absolutely, great advice. So how do you guys sell? You touched on this briefly, but how do you guys sell? How do you get into retail? What are you guys doing to produce the revenue?
Yeah, so I started out, we didn't have any distributor or contract manufacturer, no one going into stores talking to owners with our products. So I just started doing it. And, we're in 12 stores now, but, initially it was a lot of calling, a lot of going to certain stores 4 or 5 times, emailing owners, calling, just really, for lack of a better word, attacking these people. I mean, you have to be relentless. Shelf space is real estate, and the smaller your packaging, the better your chances of getting into a store are. The less room you take up, the more room for 3 products. So if you can get your packaging down to a smaller size, that can really help your chances into getting into retail. But also offering really different things. Our dog treats are vegan, plant-based, packed with superfoods like chia seeds, tahini. So and organic date paste is our first ingredient. So this was really a big call to action for retailers, especially a lot of them experiencing slumps. Some retailers that I was going to in the beginning are no longer open. So it's really saying, and also online, you can be your own retailer. Learning SEO, learning all of those things are really important in terms of getting eyes to your site, eyes to purchase. But it's really just keep
Hustle.
going, get a spreadsheet going. That's what I always, exactly, man. Get a spreadsheet going, get the buyer's info. And then also it's really a great opportunity to call these stores because I'm coming out with lines based on feedback I've gotten. I call these retailers, I'm talking to them, I'm like, what sells the best? How does this, my so-and-so competitor do? And you don't always have to call and say, hi, this is Rihanna Young. Like, you know what I mean? You can be a little slick about it, and kind of get the tea on your competitors because typically employees will just tell you, oh, that doesn't sell. Oh, that moves really quickly. We can barely keep it in stock. So it's really, using your person-to-person skills to get information, but also to give them information on you. So it kind of works both ways.
I was taking notes when Rihanna was speaking because sales is my weakest. When I started out, it was just pop-ups. There was no CBD industry. It was just underground. It was just pop-ups. And you had your decoy products on the top of the table. And if someone spoke, if you were comfortable, you kind of pulled out your CBD product. So it's been interesting to be in this space when there was no brands, no CBD, then seeing the insane rush of this launching as a luxury product, basically in downtown Manhattan. I live in West Harlem, and this completely missed my community. So it's been a challenge for me to be in retail, um, because it was so saturated when it launched in New York, like CBD brands. Even though I started before some, I didn't have the money to be on the shelf as some brands were. So now a lot of those brands are gone, or a lot of things have changed, and I'm still here. And I managed to launch my own oil, certified organic, which people were asking me for it, so that's why I did it. When you're talking CBD and all of that, I was just selling my product, and people were like, "What oil do you recommend?" And that was something I learned during the pandemic. You know, figure out who your partners are, and I just asked my farmer and what label oil, and they said yes. That has allowed me to sell more, and actually be more viable online. The learning SEO is super important as a CBD business. Whether you hire people to do it for you or you do it yourself, you have to know this, because we have so many challenges with advertising online and selling through traditional online retailers. So you have to understand the digital marketing landscape. Even if you don't do it yourself, you have to know how to direct it, because it's big right now. And my online sales are actually now bigger than some of my pop-up sales. So, and I'm only in one store. So it's really interesting. Retail is completely, you can't get a pulse on it at this point. So you just have to be on your game, have a spreadsheet, do it all.
We still do pop-ups, by the way.
Yep. And pop-ups, but there's a lot of pop-ups now. Pre-pandemic, there wasn't that many, and I feel like it's also very saturated. So you, as a CBD business, you have to be mindful of the pop-ups you participate in, or you will not sell products.
I agree with all the above. I agree that you have to do it all. You got to pound the pavement. You got to know your SEO. I'm also learning this still. And really the various avenues to keep your options open as well, because you never know when there's going to be a next pandemic and the stores have to close. So really diversifying your marketing strategy is important as well.
And I think as things open up, we're going to all be learning together with this, with this new product, with the new regulations. And I want to just circle back really briefly. There was mention of the CBD sector being more regulated now because of these newly emerging regulations and guidelines for the THC sector. So can anyone allude on that and give some inside knowledge of what's changed?
Well, having the license, you have to have a license now for whatever you do, which when I started, you didn't have to. Now you do. And the one that was really interesting was whatever county you sell in the state, you have to pay like a license fee for that, for every county you sell in. So right there, and I think the farmers are limited to the amount of CBD they can grow as well. I think there's something like 1,000 pounds or something. So they're kind of capping the industry. That's my feel.
Yeah, there's a lot of regulations that are really streamlining everything, and I think they're intended to make sure that there's not this the same mass infusion into the market, and it gets oversaturated, but also kind of hurting some of the people who have already been in this market. So we'll see. Hopefully that that pans out, and it's you guys are already 2 steps ahead. So what other opportunities do you see in this sector, either for your own product line or something that you've seen that's just really emerging and up and coming?
I would say what's really interesting is, dispensaries that are opening. I think that gives new life, new opportunity to a lot of brands. a lot of people say storefronts are kind of in decay, but I think dispensaries, especially since there's no ability to ship overstate, you can't put edibles in the mail, you can't mail cannabis at all legally. And I think this provides a really great opportunity for people that make products because you're literally getting your target market into a physical place. And especially for all different types of products, because if you use cannabis, you smoke cannabis, you probably would use a topical. You probably would have some sort of pain or some sort of need. So, I think that presents a really big opportunity. Also, delivery services. I think that's going to be a really big thing. New Yorkers are so used to getting everything. And I think cannabis is not going to be any different. They want it now. They want it yesterday, really. So I think that's looking at your business model and saying, how can I get this to consumer the quickest? Like, how can I basically be Amazon? Like, I try to ship and get it to a customer within 2-3 days. I think it's really important to get things to people quickly because it really distinguishes you among other things as well.
I just want to say I'm excited about consumption lounges. I think New York is going to be extremely creative on that concept, because if there's something we're good at in this town, it's experiences. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to create incredible experiences tailored to every type of consumer through consumption lounges.
I second that. Being newer in this area, I don't have as much experience with, so I agree with all of you.
So I just want to open up the floor for anyone who has words of wisdom for somebody coming into this market space.
I would say do your research. Just, research, download industry reports, read about what's doing well, go into places and ask what's selling, and really just ask a lot of questions because nothing is a stupid question, really. And sometimes when you think, oh, I can't ask that or they won't tell me, it's usually something you really need the answer to. So trust your gut. Trust your gut. That's something I've really learned.
Second that, trust your gut, and don't spend your money until you trademark your name. Make sure you clear. If you have a business, an idea or something, a name, start looking at all the legal ways to own it, to own the Instagrams, to own the social channels, but don't go spending money on stickers and labels and things and IG until you own the name.
I agree. I also think that it is important to have a good, strong, trusting team too, especially if you are trying to grow bigger. No matter what, you should have a strong, trusting team, but you definitely need to have things in place before you grow your company bigger, if that's your goal. And then finding a niche, I think, is a great target as well. So yeah, but I also feel like what you both have said, Miriam and Rihanna, like you gotta stick with it. You gotta keep going. You definitely have your ups and downs, and it's
self-care.
Self-care.
You have to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
You have to take care of yourself in this space.
Yeah. Without you, the product's not there. So self-care is key. Yes.
And a big one is find a mentor. You can, and you don't need just one. You can have
many.
Exactly.
Reach out and learn as much as you can about traditional business, regular business. This is an industry. This is a business. Just because it's cannabis, it doesn't mean you're not going to have to be profitable. Show like a 5-year business plan. Like start tapping into all those resources that exist now in your community or anywhere that's just for traditional business. It doesn't matter. Just show up for anything that's free that helps you be a better business person, because you're going to need it all.
That is absolutely incredible advice, ladies. You guys are powerhouses. So much knowledge has been dropped. Thank you so much for joining us with this panel. I'm sure everybody's going to get a huge value out of it. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tamika.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Fossil Pride.
This is the original instrumental.
Yeah, so that was a great panel. Thanks, John.
No, that was really good. I mean, I learned a lot of information and just reminded me of a lot of things you have to do, all the check the boxes you have to do in the very beginning. But thanks for participating in that.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think I learned more now, from rewatching. So this was so informative, and I'm glad the people out there are going to get some good knowledge from this.
Cool. So we're running short on time. That was a pretty chock full panel there. Our next panel is CannaTech. And on this panel, we talk about how cannabis and technology can merge to enhance and elevate the experience and/or your business economics. And we have Katherine Lagow from True Green, Matt Waddell from Trella, and I'm talking a little bit about blockchain and DeFi and its relationship to cannabis. So let's tee that up.
Fossil Pride.
This is the original instrumental.
Fossil Pride.
This is the original.
Everyone, welcome to the next segment of This Business of Cannabis. Today we are talking all things tech and tech, how it applies to a cannabis business. And we are lucky to have three people here from different points of tech in the industry that are going to give you some input and some insight and great connections for you to be able to know that these businesses exist. The first person we have is Matt Waddell. He's a product manager at Trella Technologies. We have Katherine Lagow. She's the president of True Green Global. And we have John Gilstrap, co-founder of Sativa DAO. I'm going to actually let them all introduce themselves and kind of get the conversation started and answering the first question, which is, what is the background of your organization, or basically what does your company do? And we can start with Matt.
All right. Thanks for having me. I'm here sitting in for our founder, Asia Atwood, and that kind of leads me directly into the background. Asia was a medical patient and was growing cannabis plants for her own personal use, and she had issues with growing tall plants in short spaces. She was using a basement space at the time, and realized that there was room to create an automation for the growing of the plant that would allow her to both do her day job normally without having to be so heavily invested, and also to begin to really track the growth of the plant and get a better yield out of the plant using automation and technology. And so that slowly transformed from that initial concept into a realization that there is an application here for vertical farming. And tall plants are not great candidates for vertical farming operations. However, if you can train those plants to grow horizontally, then you can gain a whole lot of benefits. Grow LST system that we developed, and we're really excited to see what it does for the cannabis industry.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Katherine?
Yeah, thanks for having me as well. So I am an attorney who transitioned to the cannabis industry about 4.5 years ago. I am from an operator standpoint, so that's my background. I worked with Standard Wellness for the last 4 years, doing everything from initially fundraising and expansion and applications to most recently running our operations and launch of our educational compliance marketing divisions within the company. So a little bit of everything in terms of experience within the space. I now am part of True Green as of about 2 months ago, and not too dissimilar to what Matt was saying in terms of like where this kind of started and what we do. I think there's a resounding theme in the cannabis industry that there are a lot of needs to be more efficient and to automate things and to find ways to use technology to make everyone's lives easier in this kind of environment where everybody seems to be flying the plane while they're building it. So what we do is we are a technology company that utilizes a security seal that goes on each individual unit when it leaves a building. And we turn that package into a digital, unique package within a SaaS platform so that operators have full visibility and all the way actually to seed to sale. So through the point of sale. And then also from a compliance regulatory standpoint, we really decrease the likelihood of any kind of compliance issue because all of the manual physical counting of inventory that's done right now is now done digitally and in an automated way through integrations into systems and using RFID technology. So we think we are hopefully adding a nice new addition to the tech space within cannabis through digitizing packages and helping companies look at this data set to make better business decisions and understand that actual full seed to sale part of the business.
Thank you so much. That was great. John?
That sounds exciting. Hi, thank you for having me. And it's actually good to be on this side of the panel for a while. My name is John Gilstrap. I've been operating in the CBD cannabis space since about 2016, 2017 as a vertical hemp operator. And now as a consultant, helping social equity candidates go after their licenses in cultivation and dispensary. But actually, I'm working now also in the virtual world where these guys are in the real world. And I'm a co-founder of a group called Sativa DAO, which is a Web3 Discord platform, which is hopefully building a community to discuss trends and issues and business opportunities in the cannabis space in the tri-state area. So, the goal of this group, which is called Sativa on Discord, is to ultimately start an investment DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. And this DAO will invest in opportunities in the BIPOC space for licensing, cultivation, research, and strains, and so forth. So it's a Web3 application, and it's probably a place where cannabis is going to go in the next few years.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so each of your companies are different in the tech space. So just so we know what in particular, like who's your target audience? For Katherine, let's start with you. Who is the person who's going to utilize your service, or what is the problem and or solution that your organization would handle?
Yeah, so we work directly with operators. In a perfect world, we would have dispensaries and the wholesale operators, right? The cultivators and the processors, anybody who's shipping stuff out of their building. For now, we're really starting and focusing on the dispensary level and getting dispensaries integrated there, and then also bringing on wholesale operators across the U.S.
Fantastic. Matt?
Yeah, we work with cultivators and specifically cultivators who are interested in going into vertical farming kind of setup within their facility. Generally, people who are retrofitting or building a new facility and they'd like to bring in the latest technology to maximize yields. Like I said in the intro, our technology is unique and patented in that it allows the plant to grow horizontally, which means you can you can monitor microenvironments with the unit itself, and you can and it does have some movement built into the unit, so it actually changes and modifies the microenvironment within the unit. And we also make a lot better utilization of the available light, because we're bringing the light closer to the plants in a very controlled way, and monitoring exactly how far the plant's growing, and getting real-time data back to the operator.
Okay, cool. So specifically for cultivators.
Correct.
Specifically for cultivators. And
Correct.
how about John? Who is your target customer?
So I guess the target audience for us is really everybody, because we are a decentralized platform. And really the idea is to bring in disconnected communities or underrepresented communities who may not be aware of what's going on with issues and opportunities and licensing in the space to the table. Because right now everything is really controlled by centralized authorities, either Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or even newspapers. But in those environments, there is a lot of restrictions on what can be discussed. I mean, on TikTok, for example, you can get kicked off by showing the latest strain that you've grown, which can be beneficial to somebody else. So this is a collection. We're collecting people from all over the world, really, to come and discuss the issues. And once the investment piece comes up, now you don't have to be a what are they calling it? A certified investor to invest. You don't have to you don't have to find an allotment through a Goldman Sachs to get into a deal. You're building your own deal community, and it'll allow everybody to come in and take a piece of the business. And sorry for the bells. I can't get the. I'm afraid to touch anything.
Okay.
I'm just glad it was John interrupting himself and not.
Okay. I'm like, who is with the bell?
I was trying to check my phone.
Okay, thank you. So your clients or your potential customers are basically anyone who wants to really participate in the space as far as an investor or as far as just a consumer?
Well, right now it's just sharing information and understanding what's going on in the space. And ultimately, once the community gets big enough, we'll try to flip into an investment role where there's enough critical mass of people who want to buy the tokens, the NFTs, and we can talk about that later, which will symbolize your investment amount in the fund. And then when a project comes up, all the token holders can vote on whether that project should be funded.
I see.
So
okay.
So it's anybody who's watching this panel is welcome to join the community.
And Katherine, I had one other question. So as far as could an edible company utilize your services?
Yeah, absolutely. So honestly, anybody who is an operator or anybody who is a brand that does licensing deals and various.
Like if you're a producer or something like that.
Exactly right, and we and I think the interesting point that you just made, right? Like someone like Wana, you don't necessarily have licenses in all these states, but you do have products in all those states through someone else. Even a company like that would have the ability to use our data. And there's a consumer engagement piece of the platform also that provides direct-to-consumer marketing opportunities in a way that don't currently exist in the industry. So that aspect as well ties into somebody like a gummy brand or somebody that does licensing deals, but isn't necessarily in the state worried about the compliance side necessarily.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, great. Thank you for that. So my next question is, does this help with compliance? So I'm gathering as far as you, Katherine, just to continue, this would be that you would eliminate person having to do that because you do that work already?
Yeah, exactly. So I spent obviously a lot of times over the last 4 years dealing with compliance issues in various buildings that we were in. And a lot of it oftentimes comes down to human error. You've got people counting 10,000 units a day and trying to reconcile that with a point of sale system or that with metric or that with your manifest or whatever else. And, counting is actually one of the hardest things that you do in these buildings because it's just
I
really
can't even imagine counting 10,000 anything.
Yeah. So it's you're like going through boxes and counting things, and then you're matching inventories that comes in. So I found over the years that it's actually one of the hardest things that happens in the building, and you need somebody that's not only meticulous but also doesn't get bored easily, which is really none of us. Because the second you count to 10, you're like, wait, am I at 10 or am I at 12? And I've done it too. Then you have to start all over. So from a compliance standpoint, what we do is we really take that human error out of it from two sides, right? All of a sudden you can using RFID, you can scan an inventory, a manifest, a vault. You can do all of that in what maybe takes 6 hours. You can do that in about 15 minutes. So that element of it alone in terms of reducing labor costs is huge, but also our systems are integrated. So instead of that person then having to go and do the data entry and say, yes, there were supposed to be 100 units of MAC, there were 100 units of MAC. Now our systems automatically pull that report so that the human element of the data entry is also gone, which is nice for people that manage remotely because you can get automated reports reconciling everything and showing you that the inventory's been done and here's your automated report. So from a compliance standpoint, we think it drastically reduces not just the time that your employees spend doing it, but also the errors that are affiliated with counting and the opportunities for diversion and theft, which do exist and often exist at the unit level. You don't often see people running out of buildings with whole plants, but we do find that most of the diversion and theft happens once you get down into those individual packages.
Understood. Thank you. As far as Matt, how about the same question for compliance and regulation? How does your company address that?
Yeah, there are several ways. I'll speak to two right now. First is if you're in a state or in a regulatory regime that has a plant count limit, we are maximizing the yield on a single plant per unit, and getting a 8, potentially 10-foot tall plant growing in a horizontal space that is, effectively 1 or 2 feet. So we're making up quite a bit of utilization of that horizontal space and reducing that plant count dramatically compared to your yield. So from that perspective, and then on the other side is there's a huge pressure, both financially and ethically, because we need to for environmental sustainability and government or ESG practices. And we have a lot of features built into this unit that are helping to improve that. One of them is the auto sync LED feature, which we turn on lights as I said before, the plant grows horizontally over time. There's a chunk of that horizontal space that isn't used when the plant is young. We don't need to turn those lights on immediately. The unit monitors that growth rate, turns the lights on as needed, and we reduce light consumption by up to 61%.
Interesting.
That is very cool.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Sure.
Of course.
Okay. Now I have a lot of questions for you, Matt, just in like my past life as an operator. But the opportunity in states that measure canopy size by the square footage on the ground, right? Also, Ohio is those weird states where you can have a table that's 10 by 10 and that's it. But if you stack a table on top of that, it's still only a 10 by 10. And you could do that, up 10 levels. So that's a funny little loophole. But I'm curious how you guys navigate states where metric tags go on based on the height of a plant.
That's
now this is a reason for you guys to come back together and connect, because there's the magic that's gonna happen.
I don't know that we've run into that and had a clear answer, come out of it yet.
Yeah, I was just curious. Sorry.
No, that's a great question. That's
a really good question.
So your customer is not. Your customer is not a small cultivator. I'm imagining it's a large cultivator.
They could be. We've delivered to some very small. There's the opportunity to stack, but there are other reasons to use the Trello unit if you're not stacking them. when the plant is being trained by a robot, you're reducing the stress actually, because it is watching the plant growth moment by moment.
Interesting.
And very slowly moving the plant forward. So you have less stress on the plant, which allows it to grow more quickly. And then you have fewer moments during the grow where you need to have a grower come in and manipulate the plant and deal with tying branches back, et cetera. So you're reducing labor, and
Wow.
we've delivered to very small, medical providers as well. In Hawaii.
That's fantastic.
In Hawaii,
I was like, are you making a personal size one that I could put in my closet? No.
we've got a 4 foot long unit, which is perfect for that. Yeah.
Say that again.
It's 4 feet long and about 3-4 feet high.
Really?
Yeah.
So depending on your size, Tanya, you're good to go.
I mean, I might have to convert a closet. That's fantastic. I didn't even think that.
I've done some of the grow trials, and it's really enjoyable to come downstairs and look and see that the plant is
Wow, that's amazing. That's great to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so John, yourself, compliance.
Yes. So, and I do have a question for Katherine, actually. But on the compliance end, we really just provide a platform for people to discuss compliance issues. So if you're in one territory and this has come up, you're able to, on this platform, and there'll be a chat room for compliance and regulatory, share your experience with compliance and regulation to help another person in the community, and then they can share that information. It's similar to like a Reddit function.
Okay.
But you have a little more flexibility on what you can discuss and what kind of pictures and images you can share. So it's really just helping people understand compliance. And also we push down compliance and regulatory information that we get from the states,
Nice.
and just load it up on the platform. So that's
Awesome.
how we help. But my question for Katherine is there, so with these tags, is there like a consumer engagement piece of it? Like if you're a producer and you have this tag that can be scanned, can you talk to the customer or communicate?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think as an operator can be really frustrating outside of the compliance realm is how do you market to people right now? And in any kind of way that is efficient and scalable across multiple states, right? In every state, they have different marketing rules, how you can and cannot communicate where. And there's also this disintermediation because you sell to a dispensary who is then in charge of your customer, right? So you lose the opportunity to speak to them directly. So one of the things that we can do on our seal, on our security seal, is you can embed a limitless amount of metadata in that. So we can drive people anywhere someone wants to go. If you want the first thing that pops up to say, this has never been open, it's safe, here are the test results, then that's what'll pop up. If you want it to say, follow us on Facebook or Instagram, then that's what'll pop up. And then we can navigate that consumer any way you want, right? So if you want the highlight to be on your strains and the benefits of them, if you want to drive them to your Weed Maps page to shop again, if you want to drive them to the social equity programs and give back programs that you guys are doing, then we can drive them there as well. So that's really the kind of like add-on, but the really cool piece of it is that it's completely customizable and per product also, right? It's not like you build it out once and that's it. Every time you add a new SKU in, we can redirect and manipulate that data to have it send people wherever you want them to be. So it really provides, I think, kind of a first of its kind ability to communicate with patients directly and really make them go where you want them to go once they have that package in their hand.
And that's so important because I think as a customer and as a patient, I want to be able to communicate with my brands because I want to know, what do you do? Like, who do you support? What is your social media looking like? So I know if I really want to support you, you know what I mean? So I think that's important. So the next question is, what are the costs? I'm going to start with you, John. What are the costs for your service?
It's free.
It's free.
It's just your time to get on. But there's something I maybe we'll talk about this later, but so the NFT is already being used in the cannabis space in certain markets. because, you know, banking is very difficult, transferring funds is very difficult. There are instances, and this is happening outside of cannabis too, where you're a provider, you issue an NFT for $10 or something. It's your meme on it, you know, a little green flower dancing around, and someone buys 2 NFTs from you, and that goes into a bank. And then when you want to sell a product, you can just scan and redeem the NFT for the product. So this is a kind of a financial transaction, and you know the SEC and the Treasury are monitoring these things as well. But so I guess if you're talking about what are costs and money, it's really just participation in the marketplace. So our product is free.
Understood. Cool. Thank you. Katherine?
Yeah, my answer is not free, unfortunately. So we should have made John go last on that one. So we have a few options, and we're very conscious of everybody's different price points, right? In a medical market, you're not making the same revenue as you are in a recreational market. So we're very open to working with everyone to figure out a fit that works. We have the tag has its own price, and then the SaaS platforms have different pricing as well, so that we can kind of navigate where you are with your revenue and what makes sense. We have an ROI calculator that we use to determine what makes sense for everybody, so that someone can type in the number of units that they're outputting in a month, how much labor they're currently spending versus what cost savings we have in there.
Right.
So we definitely have a sliding scale from that standpoint, but we also have a social equity minority business program that we have. So that minority-owned dispensary or operator can get a discount on the tags as well as the platform. We know compliance is a huge piece of this, and I think it's oftentimes one of the first things that's overlooked and where people have hiccups because you don't make any money off of compliance, right? You're focusing on revenue.
Right.
So trying to help new businesses, small businesses navigate that in a way that's affordable is a big priority for us.
Thank you. And that was actually my next question. So I appreciate that. Matt, costs.
Yeah, so, and this kind of ties into the last thing we talked about with possibly putting one in your closet. We're right now have a residential to commercial kind of transition unit that is called our Model 4E. It's a bit scaled down from all of the features that we've been discussing. It has a max canopy of around 12 square feet, and it's a 4-foot long unit, similar to what I just described earlier. And that one's $1,700 right now.
17.
Yep.
And how many plants do you think you could grow in something that size?
So it's a single plant.
Okay.
But again, it's reducing your
it's reducing the time. Right.
Training time, increasing the plant growth rate, and really getting you a large full canopy in.
And it eliminates the mess ups that I would do. That I'm nervous.
So,
I'm nervous.
yeah, and we've got an estimate of, for this one, there's a little bit more hands-on involved, but the estimate is 30 minutes of training, hands-on plant training per month, which is
wow, that's fantastic.
Pretty low.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What have you seen as far as yield goes from a particular plant with your system?
So, I've got numbers somewhere, and I know they've been updated recently. I don't have them right in front of me.
Okay, no problem.
I'll answer that in a minute. Keep going.
Okay, cool.
Wait, so what's your harvest cycle on it? So like a normal plant as compared to how like a normal person or a normal growth cycle, what do you guys expect with yours?
So it's a slightly increased rate of growth. So you really have to compare it to a similar plant height in order to compare apples to apples on that. And so we've got 3 models. There's the 4-foot, the 6-foot, and the 8-foot model, and those essentially correspond to plant heights. So expect to see some increases over what you would see for that kind of a plant height.
Thanks. Cool.
Thank you. And then my other one was about social equity. Katherine, you answered that. John, how is your company helping social equity companies, social equity applicants?
Yeah. So once again, the Sativa server is creating this platform where everybody, even disconnected groups, can come together and learn what's going on. I mean, as you know, sometimes, Tanya, there's this information gap between the state and what the big companies are doing and what's happening in the marketplace. And to the extent that social equity applicants or underrepresented communities can be at the table and get equal information that everybody else is getting, I think that's an advantage. And also, if you're an investor and you're looking to talk to social equity candidates or look for social equity opportunities, this can be a platform where you can find that and invest in it in maybe a frictionless way. So it's really bringing communities together that are heretofore have been, disconnected in different parts of the world, if you say.
Cool. Matt?
Yeah. So in addition to being BIPOC owned and founded company, we've got a real strong dedication to, because these units are not just for cannabis, we're expecting to deploy them for food and a lot of other plants that are fruiting plants that are capable of growing in a similar kind of a way. We really are dedicated to working on reducing food deserts and growing and deploying these in communities that need to be able to grow indoors and need to be able to produce more than just cannabis, although, we're all partial to that.
That's fantastic, actually. There's in New Jersey, there's a big vertical, the warehouse that they converted into a vertical vegetable grow, which I think that's amazing. So I love that your product is cannabis friendly, but not only for cannabis, which I think
and to that point, often if you see a traditional vertical farm these days, it's short growing plants.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And that's because it's hard to stack a tall growing plant, right? And that's our main problem that we're solving. And so, a lot of leafy greens, a lot of things like that, but you don't necessarily have the ability to produce the full breadth of, fruits, other vegetables, things that we still need to be able to provide to eat.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And then my last question as we wrap up, and I'm sure I know the answer already, but does cannabis have to embrace agri-tech or tech in general to reach its lofty expectations? And those expectations are lofty. John, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I clearly think so, because every other industry is using tech to accelerate growth or connect with customers or count inventory better. So I think it's something that's very important. And in my space, I think if you're in the cannabis space, you definitely should get to know what NFTs are about and DeFi and decentralized finance and even the metaverse. I know it sounds kind of hokey and kooky, but you will be able to visit a dispensary virtually with your friends where you can go in and look at what's in the inventory, see what's on a farm or see what's on the shelf, and be able to purchase within this metaverse, right there. And so once again, a frictionless and even a bankless transaction. So I think that's already happening in retail, your traditional retail. It's going to happen in cannabis as well. And it'll be a little more nimble because it's decentralized. You don't have to go through the man to get stuff done. I think that's been the problem with cannabis for a long time. The man was in the way. So if we can find ways to interact peer to peer, I think that's going to be great.
Thanks, John. Katherine?
Yeah, I also agree, although I don't have any good tidbits on metaverse and NFT, unfortunately. But I think, the cannabis industry, I think that oftentimes people, like, the immediate perception is like, oh, the cannabis industry is so cool. You guys, that's so awesome. This is such a cool industry to be part of. And then you run a company and you're like, there's nothing cool about this. It is miserable right now. Right? Like they're so complicated. Startup is hard no matter what industry you're in. And then you add all of this stuff to it, right? Like you add the no banking, you add 280E, you add that we have very few infrastructural systems because so many companies won't get involved in cannabis and create the tech that exists in every other industry because of the banking issues. So the industry is really far behind. And in a world that it's 2022, you look at this space a lot of times and think like, I'm living in the past because the technologies just haven't really entered the space. In the last couple of years, I think you've really started to see it. Companies like Trella, right? That you wouldn't have seen that 5 years ago because the investment I'm sure that it took to get that company started 5 years ago, they would have been like, I'm really close to absolutely no, and everybody keep getting a little bit closer to the space where they think, okay, maybe safe banking will pass. Maybe technology companies will get in here. So I think it's coming. And I think that whether it's the next year or 2 years, companies being nimble enough to implement technologies and also having the capital set aside to implement those technologies, I think will be a big piece of it. Because if you aren't planning for it, then $100,000 ERP system a year, it's not in your budget. But if everybody else around you starts doing it and you're behind and your operations are slower and your margins are smaller because of it, it does impact business. So I think it's very close to kind of those doors opening up. And I think that whether it's efficiencies like Matt or whether it's companies like Sativa just being able to understand where patients and consumers are getting their information, all sides of the business are really going to change once safe banking passes or some version of it, right? Whether it's safe banking or not,
exactly. Right.
Something like that. I think that the technology, that's the space that's just been sitting on the sidelines the most, right? Just waiting for this to open up.
Thank you for that. I'm going to have to circle back to you for something also, but offline, because we're doing some women in CannaTech stuff and I need your voice.
Okay.
Matt, please tell me the embracing of agritech. Obviously, you are a tech company with robots and stuff. So we have to embrace because
no surprise. My answer is going to be we have to. Echoing John, but coming to it from not necessarily from the computer tech side, but Asia and Dre and I are all mechanical engineers, and so I've also got that that kind of disposition coming to this, and I really see an opportunity to make big efficiency gains. If you just sit down and look through the numbers for what vertical farming can do to actually make good use of the energy that we do have to put into an indoor grow, it's kind of a no-brainer. We need to do it in order to be good global stewards, and we don't have an option. So if we don't, we'll be in trouble later. And I think it's great to see people really investing in it. And I have been around the cannabis space outside of Trella and before Trella, and I just seeing how receptive and open people are and how cognizant they are of what we're doing to the planet. Cannabis hasn't always had the best track record as far as energy use, but we have a real opportunity to change it, and I think our connection to the plant and our connection to nature makes us the right people and the right industry to kind of push that forward.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are done. Thank you so much for your contribution to this panel. Again, John Gilstrap you have Awaken.Space, but it's Sativa DAO. Katherine Lagow from True Green Global. I say it like that because I know I'd mess it up. And Matt Waddell from Trella Technologies. Thanks again for joining me, and talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Muscle Rod.
This is an original instrumental.
Hey everyone, we're back. That was fun moderating that. I really enjoyed that conversation. So, and if you are paying, Women Grow's been doing a Women in CannaTech series. So it's on this channel wherever you're watching it now. So definitely check it out. There was some good stuff. What's our next one, John?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Well, next up, we have the Hudson Valley Cannabis Industry Association with Andrew Shriver and Dave Holland from the New York City Cannabis Industry Association. And this panel is moderated by Kari Sept from 10th Magazine.
Fantastic. All right, here we go.
Muscle Rod.
This is an original instrumental.
Tanya, we're all good. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Nice to see you all today. We are here with Andrew Shriver and David Holland, both of the Hudson Valley Cannabis Industry Association. It's great to see you, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today.
Sure, our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you
for the opportunity.
Wonderful, and being flexible while we're at it. Just for an introduction, I am Kari Sept, and I'm an independent journalist and publisher of the 10th Magazine. We're art and culture publication based out of New Orleans and also the Hudson River Valley, and we cover culture, technology, food, agriculture, activism, and all from the point of view of traditionally outsider communities. So think Black and Brown, think queer, think diasporic in the context of the American experience. And for the past couple of years, I've been really gravitating towards the cannabis coverage. And this really became cemented for me personally when I got to the Hudson Valley, because it was kind of the conversation of the day, what everyone was talking about. And you also got varying points of view around it. So there were the small, to mid-sized farmers who've been growing and doing the thing here for some time, years, decades. Then there were the cannabis consultants that were a new sort of type of person I would meet, who seemed to be the only ones who actually knew about what was happening in the legislature, no less how to get a license, how to apply, what to do once you might even be able to get there. And then, of course, there were big money folks showing up quite a bit as well in the Hudson Valley, just snapping up land left and right, and the complications around tax code that encourage them to do this, and they're kind of hobby farmers, we like to call them, that see big money cannabis as a cash crop and are interested in sort of engaging in it. And then, of course, there's the local legacy folks, or the Black market folks, who were worried about how they're going to have some skin in the game and be able to kind of ride this wave of cannabis as cultural phenomenon. So, that's kind of where I'm coming from. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to both of you just about kind of how the Hudson Valley Cannabis Industry Association exists within this sort of framework of voices of folks who are coming to the table to explore the cannabis industry. And then obviously how the space has really set up the mechanics of it for those who might be interested, or as we like to call them, kind of curious. But yeah, David, I'll let you start with this and we'll just roll from here, get a couple good conversations going.
Oh, you're muted, Dave.
Thanks. Sorry about that. The Hudson Valley is a unique place. Throughout the world, the Hudson River, the valley is just something that is unparalleled elsewhere. And in a conversation that I had with a guy named Noah Potter one day back in 2019, we talked about what, as long-term advocates in the space, what are we missing? And he and I talked about putting together an industry association. And immediately I thought of Andrew Shriver, who I just met, only a month or two earlier than that, about, hey, we need to do something, and it really shouldn't be a state organization right now. we should look at the different regions, and particularly the Hudson Valley, which has not only people that are consumers there, but its agricultural diversity and its opportunities there are really something. So with another woman named Elizabeth Shields, the four of us really co-founded what became the New York City Cannabis Industry Association and its alternate or alter ego, if you will, Hudson Valley, of which Andrew is now president. So Andrew, I mean, I think that nobody better to speak about the Hudson Valley than you.
Yeah, but you just stole all my thunder, Dave. So I'm not sure where to go with it. But I'll see if I can add. Yeah, the short of it is we recognized, New York City is its own creature. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, so I know it really well. I was there until I went to college, and the challenges that you face on every level are very different than everywhere else in the state. And we weren't going to pretend, as Dave said, to sort of say, well, we represent all of the interests in the state. We couldn't speak for Western New York at the time, although I dare say, as the industry associations have grown, we're sort of in a place to do that a little bit with colleagues who are from there. But the gist was, if you look at the city, it's almost like it's not only a different place for regulation, it's also kind of a different time, a different era. If you go into New York City, discussing the stigma of cannabis is a bit of an old conversation at this point, right? But as soon as you get north of the city and into the suburbs, you have the immediate suburbs surrounding the city, Westchester and on up to Putnam, and then you get into the agricultural and farm country. The understanding of what's going on with the plant, the stigma surrounding the plant, people's perceptions, and also the needs that people have economically. Every single one of those categories is different. And our thinking was, in the beginning, and really since before and then after legalization in New York, we've been working jointly together on those strands of policy that are going to be statewide and have impacts. The sort of spine of the policies, what's in the MRTA and how we deal with the regulations, right? Those are statewide issues. But inevitably, the conversation turns to, but that won't work here. And so, the best example is, you could just even take where I am in Westchester County. I mean, there's, tons of different municipalities, dozens of them, and each have their own rules, restrictions, and perceptions. And that's true no matter where you go in New York. So the mission is really to understand your region, understand what the needs are, and understand what people need to understand about the plant so that you can kind of help with accurate data and education. But it's not one size fits all.
Right. And then if you could elaborate a little bit more about the sort of types of voices that, are in this space right now, sort of competing for attention, resources, to have their voices heard. When you speak about community, these are not just businesses, but these are people, right? And this is a big thing as well, this idea of cannabis, still being stigmatized in certain places. Of course, there's all this conversation about it in relationship to criminal justice reform, ideas like restorative justice. So there's like a lot of folks, but I was wondering if you all could maybe elaborate a bit on if there were a table. And we saw from the top, offices like the Cannabis Control Board and the Office of Cannabis Management. Who are the people kind of having conversations about it around that?
Dave, if you don't mind, I'm gonna put people,
go ahead,
but then I'm gonna ask you to sort of comment on them, if that's okay.
Go, please.
The first people who need to be at the head of the table are people who are in the legacy market and people who the state is calling would qualify as social equity applicants. The short of it is, I won't go too long on this because I know Dave was going to have a lot to say, but it's not just a moral imperative to reverse the impacts of the war on drugs, the disproportionate enforcement. It's an economic one. If you don't bring in legacy and people from those communities to be part of the legal cannabis business in New York, then you're excluding them, and you're going to have a situation like in Western states where you might have 75% of a still legacy market, even though you've had a legal market in place for years and years now. The reason for that is if you don't invite them in, they'll continue what they're doing, and you can't blame them for it, and they're going to outcompete, outsell, and not be subject to taxation. So you're going to have a failed market. So they need to be the first table. But beyond that, this goes to the Hudson Valley, you need the farmers. You need people who qualify under other categories of social equity, like service disabled veterans. You really, really need teachers. You need principals. You need concerned parents. And you need kind of a younger generation of activists, not just the ones who have come before us that brought us to this point, but people who are in their 20s and 30s who are growing up in a different world with different perceptions about the plant, because they need to be able to participate in the conversation about what's that future going to look like now that we've done a little bit of rectifying the past. That was a longer answer than I meant to, Dave, but why don't you fill in?
No, I think you nailed it. There are so many different communities that have been out there. I've been an attorney for, coming on 30 years almost. And so I've been working at this from the criminal defense side, and I was with High Times Magazine for about 12 years. And I'm the head of New York State's chapter of NORML, which is National Organization to Reform Marijuana Laws. Those have been constants in the conversation. But as Andrew's pointed out, it's really the people that have been the market that are the least represented right now. They have fear factors. They've lost their children before. They have fears of tax consequences should they admit that I had a side income stream, or that's how I lived off the grid and maintained my family. There are whole generational communities that are now slowly getting into a comfort zone to be able to say, we have a voice, we have been, and we deserve to be at that table, and they should be at the front of the line for licenses. So one of the things that I've been working on, and both individually and through the cannabis industry associations, is an amnesty program that I've been drafting up that really allows for a way for these people not only get to the front of the line, but for their legalized market to benefit from some of the knowledge that they have. Not necessarily about who are the players or what people did. Nobody's looking to point fingers. But how do the unwritten rules of the markets, it's the world's largest market, actually work? How are handshake deals done? How are people obtaining credit from each other when it's a stranger meets stranger type of relationship? Those are the pedagogical tools that really are required for the legalized market to really be able to not only sustain itself, but to assimilate and incorporate those people that have been the market. And the only way you're going to do that is make them the leaders of the existing market, just legalize it and allow them to take it over. And then other entrants should be allowed into the space. So that's where you're hearing lots of voices come in, and they're coming from a variety of perspectives.
Right.
We left out law enforcement. We got to have police at the table. We got to have law enforcement at the table too.
Okay, right. Law enforcement, right. Because again, folks have been affected by the war on drugs on both sides, right? Yeah. And it would be short-sighted to not engage everyone in sort of where we see the future of this business headed. Now, I'm here to also kind of stand in for the point of view of the folks who are potentially looking at this space. Again, this cannabis gold rush that is very much kind of at the front of attention of national media. But, there's also this kind of behind the scenes conversation that it seems like it's almost like a pay to play type of situation going here, right? So there's a lot of kind of platitudes being shared around, what we're thinking about in relationship to kind of like, affecting folks who've been most harmed, or, kind of creating pipelines and access to capital and all these things. And, I guess there is a question, however, that I'd like to pose to you all. If you're all at the table and having conversations about how we push forward, are there opportunities that you all are sort of brokering or creating for folks to work together, right? So it's more than just about one individual or one kind of consortium of folks acquiring a license, right? There are all these regulations that need to be met. There are the sort of financial and capital requirements. Do you all see there as being room to build partnerships? And what do successful partnerships look like?
Well, from my perspective, and I think Andrew brings a lot of unique perspectives as well, but the privileged people that seem to think that they're entitled to come in because they have access to wealth and they haven't been part of the industry before, but they can obviously, in their arrogance, think that they've got so much to offer people, really are missing the boat. And I think it does not have good foreboding for what the market will be, because there is fundamental, and as Andrew pointed out, law enforcement's there, and as you said, Kari, it's the communities have bred an entire predisposition towards this plant and the people that have been involved with it. And so it's breaking down that stigma and having those conversations. And then these people that come in as the outsiders thinking that they're entitled because of cash to learn whole communities survived on the continued availability of this plant by keeping that plant available and preventing it from being eradicated from this country. Those are the people that, I don't care how much money you have. You don't have the smarts, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the logistics or the understanding of how this market really can work. And so you'll just create a two-market system like we're seeing in other states. And therefore, unless and until those conversations take place, which can only happen by a degree of amnesty where people can feel comfortable saying, this is how I did it, you know, not necessarily pointing a finger at anybody, but this is how the market truly operates. Those people who come with millions, I wish them all the best of luck, but I will not be surprised if a number of them go belly up in short order, because you will not eradicate the world's largest market in New York simply because you're privileged and you have cash. It just won't work that way.
If I could, I guess maybe add a little nuance to what Dave just said, in the sense of, you know, one aspect of one thing that's problematic that I see and it's happening in other states is that there's a sort of us versus them attitude, right? In terms of how we're going to roll out the market. And that's a little dangerous in the sense of, as Dave said, there are people who come into this with a certain level of arrogance. I agree with that. And I totally agree that those people who really don't know or understand the plant or why it's, you know, what it stands for and what the destigmatization is all about, they're the ones who are going to have the toughest time. By the same token, you know, I work in my capacity as an attorney who come in who are not from the legacy market and who do understand the plant and appreciate it and who don't need help, right? Who have the cash and all that. The first thing, my first conversation with them is, what is it that attracts you to this, right? And if the answer is, well, it's a widget, you know, I can sell widgets and make money, I try to sort of like cut it off a little bit early and say, you know, I'm not sure. This is where you want to be. You sort of have to pass the threshold of really understanding what it's about. But beyond that, the next thing I say is, well, what I really need you to understand and really be ready for is that you will not be first in line, and that needs to be a really good thing for you, right? You need to be happy about that. And beyond that, you need to make sure that when we're doing an application for you to get a license, that you have a robust social equity plan, right? It's not a crime to be rich and white. It's okay. It is wrong to have any means and not recognize that you are joining something that has been a longer conversation that you were fortunate to be a part of because people came before you and took risks that you didn't take. And so fundamentally, for this conversation to really work, there has to be mutual respect coming from that side to start, so that it's understood we're not here to do what's happened in other states where the really wealthy come in, take over the market, and then later on, you know, the funds drip down to social equity. New York is designed to do the opposite. We hope it does the opposite. But at the end of the day, you need everybody to be able to come together on this. And it can't just be bipolarized. What really needs to happen is that, you know, people from the legacy market, people of means, and people with goodwill need to get together to have these conversations. Part of what our association does is we form committees for exactly that purpose. Our members get together on a topic: banking, amnesty, social equity, home grow, medical grow, the license categories. They talk about what this should look like. They talk about what the regulations should say. And one of the key aspects is bringing together what we call incubators and entrepreneurs, right? People from legacy and people with money, you all need each other. The legacy operators know growing better than anybody who will ever read a book. And the people who don't know it but have the cash, those two need to meet. And those two need to be, you know, one needs to be helping the other.
I mean, that's incredible. I love what you said there. I also love that you say it's not a crime to be, you know, sort of white and rich, just like it's not a crime to be, you know, Black or brown and of means as well. I think what you see a lot of as well is money and celebrity flooding the market as well across all social, you know, racial lines, right? Everyone's trying to jockey to see, you know, where they can fit in and where they can kind of benefit. But I love what you all say, that there's actually an economic incentive to really prioritize the folks who are part of the legacy market, the folks who've been most affected, who have the knowledge, right? Because so much about what we're going to see is sort of diminishing returns around this explosiveness around cannabis, right? It'll be, how do you market it? I think so much of it as a plant, it's sort of medicinal usage and all these things will be so relevant. And it's the folks with the knowledge and the history and the time spent with the plant that will best be able to push, you know, kind of it to market in a way. So there's, you know, this notion in America, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense, right? But you all are creating a space where it's like, no, there's an economic advantage to including everyone in this situation. And that might look like a partnership, that might look like a special venture fund set up that really speaks to folks and is allowed to kind of like pipeline capital, resources and infrastructure and knowledge. So that's really, really great. I do wonder if you all see, you know, the sort of idealism and the work that's really going into keeping folks accountable, right? Is that realistic given the amount of money entering the market right now? I know that the initial licenses have been granted, but I know like right on the other side of that, you know, it's the real big guys who are operating in multiple states who are really going to be allowed to come in and do the larger than 1 acre grows. So is it realistic? And then is there still going to be work happening to kind of rein folks in? Or is it sort of like, you know, we've hit the point of legislation, now it's a free for all? And how do we keep, you know, kind of folks accountable as we go?
Well, you know, the invisible hand of capitalism, as Adam Smith called it, isn't necessarily even-handed. So there's inevitably those people, the haves and the have-nots, are going to be in different battles. But one of the things that makes cannabis really unique, and I think that will be the great equalizer, is this. You know, Marlboro cigarettes, McDonald's burgers, Budweiser beer, they taste the same every store that they're sold in, no matter where they are in the country. Cannabis seems to defy every business model out there. When I used to put on the Cannabis Cup events with High Times Magazine, you know, the winner of winning strains, all of a sudden people would immediately go and buy seeds from those strains and then hybridize them with other things, because they're constantly looking for different entourage effects that come from different cannabinoid levels and concentrations of this and that and terpenes. So unlike cigarettes, beer in particular, where we see, you know, a similarity of people that are consumers of a product that sometimes was considered not good for you, you know, they were looking for uniformity. I don't think cannabis, I think craft grow wins in the long run. There will always be those consumers that smoke, you know, the mid-level brands that are just going to be consistently mediocre. But I think craft and the connoisseurs that go with cannabis is a much different model, that those people coming in with lots of cash tend to, you know, there's an inverse proportion that they don't have a lot of understanding that there's a reason why big corporations have not penetrated this before. It has not a lot to do with prohibition. It has lots to do with consumerism. And so I think those are factors that will allow, there may be inevitability that the big multi-state organizations will run those big mediocre grows and have those multi-products. But the room for the marketplace for people to come in and still make the livings they were hoping to make before is still there. So I don't know that it's idealism. I think it's realism, provided that people now acquire the tools in some of these partnerships that allow them to get branding, intellectual property protection, packaging, logos, all that goes into it, which before you didn't have to worry about because you were the only game in town. But as I said before, you know, the key to this is the community's trust. And so trust will be the coin of the realm for the future of both big and small operators. And I think that's the key ingredient that we got to focus on now.
You know, I'd add, there's one other, I suppose New York is unique in that they built an advantage into the law that, on one hand, when you go back to capitalism, it's going to offend every sort of free market capitalist. But when you sort of think about market economics, supply and demand, and creating opportunity, the objective of New York statute, cannabis law, was to create as many cannabis businesses as possible and as many small businesses as possible. So, for example, where in other states, I'll take Massachusetts, for example, you can apply for a license where you can have a commercial level enterprise that goes from grow through processing through retail delivery, right? Straight the whole seed to sale chain. That type of license is only limited for what's called a micro business in New York, and then it's not direct to retail. But generally speaking, everyone's going to be in their own lane. So you can only cultivate, or you can only have a dispensary, or only on site. There are exceptions, but that's the general rule. So the objective was, we don't want some large monopoly to come in. And there is also a cap in terms of you can only have an interest in up to 3 dispensaries, for example, 1 cultivation facility. So, you know, when you have those guardrails in place by design, it's harder to get, you know, big cannabis to get a foothold in. That being said, the problem with any law like this one is that it does have a lot of regulatory flexibility. And so could you, under this existing law, come in and say, okay, well, we are the Kmart of cannabis and we want to establish, you know, a $400,000 square foot grow? You could. And will that happen? To some extent, it will. And this is the hard part. This is the hard part about advocacy. If you, and this is when Dave and I, we met at a lobbying day in Albany years ago, and this is part of our first conversation. If you are always demanding the entire loaf, you may never get fed, right? And in that's a pragmatic approach, and it's one that some people may criticize, because some may say, and I understand it, well, if we don't get everything we need, then we'd rather not have it. There's a lot of reason to be saying that too, and I respect those voices a lot. In order to make change on a political level, on a state level, you have to be as realistic as possible, and mitigate as much as possible the impacts that you're talking about of big money coming in and sort of flooding it. The system is designed for that here in New York. I think other states are going to follow suit. They've already tried to sort of copy our cannabis law. The hard part is to get those people who are disappointed that it's not going far enough to still participate, because my view is the longer you stay at it and the more you chip away at it, the closer you'll come to the ideal that you're going for.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of tension points really around it, and folks have a right or are skeptical, and I think that history has proven that big business is going to come in, and it's that's just the story of cannabis versus big pharma, how it's been criminalized, or kind of big agriculture and food. So I'm really excited to see what New York State's going to do and how it can sort of serve as a model. So many other states have failed miserably, when it comes to the kind of social justice and equity elements. And I think that they were just sort of out the gate destined to fail, although the goodwill was really there. So I'm interested to know what the, industry association here in the Hudson Valley, are you all also offering a lot of points of connection for education, like you all said, and marketing and those types of resources beyond the kind of 5 points of licensing?
Absolutely. We've basically become a de facto think tank. The object is, when the members join our organization, they don't need to have credentials or anything like that. You become a member, you can join committees that deal with all of these issues: what to do about licensing, what to do about banking, what to do about social equity, what to do about medical cannabis, home-grow cannabis. And we've got committees that are devoted to these topics. People get together and talk about these things, and then oftentimes we've produced these policy papers that are written by our members. And the main criteria are, you have to be respectful in the conversation, and you have to be data-driven and accurate. Those are the two, pillars. When that happens, we've actually seen remarkable work product come out from our members, who some of whom, didn't graduate high school, and others who hold graduate degrees. Right. And then we get that out to the state, and the state takes a look, and we get into conversations with our members, taking the lead sometimes with those who have written their reports to say, this is what we think. So it's more than just in order to make change, we always go back to our tagline: join the conversation, right? From dialogue comes understanding, from understanding comes action. That's the idea. So I think what our organizations do really well is we invite people to these committees, and then they meet online in their own forums. We also have, generally about monthly, some educational forum online, open to the public. Generally speaking, we've done it for free. We may have some we'll charge. We present on all of these issues, so that we have one that's in the works right now, which is basically the basics of the cannabis law and the cannabis market for people who might be interested in getting in. But we've had panels on medical. We've had panels on how to talk to your kids about it. We've had panels with law enforcement, actually, who participated in that. And one of our committee chairs, Shauna Comer, who had led that one, who's an educator. So it's essentially, what problem do we need to face, to discuss, to have an open dialogue about? And we'll either put on a front-facing forum or bring people into that dialogue. And that's our engine. That's what we do.
Yeah, and Andrew, I mean, I'm so glad you raised it, because that's going to be July 26th. We're going to have the Canna Basics, what you can do today, what you can do to get ready today for putting in your application tomorrow. In addition to that, we also once a month put on something called Weed Wednesdays, where it's just a social gathering of people with an interest that want to meet other thought leaders, or people, kind of curious, to those people that have been, quietly operating in the background, or looking to make connections, like you were saying, building partnerships, trusts, and other relationships with people. So we've been in the Hudson Valley and in New York City. I think we've really, and I particularly am proud of this organization that Andrew and Lizzie and I have put together. We have changed so dramatically. Instead of looking for a uniform rallying cry of legalize it, it's all about, now that we, careful what you wish for, it might come true. It's come true. How do we improve it there? And nobody ever seems to address that. And so I'm just so proud of all these committees and the work that they do, that we've been able to sort of just create the vehicle for doing that. So that's what's driving the Hudson Valley. And I think we're going to drive the state eventually. There are great advocacy organizations out there, both Women Grow, there's Normal, there's all that, but they're operating on a slightly different model than we are. But I think that's the key to reaching the communities, to change the dialogue, is how we're going about it.
I should add a plug that there's a Weed Wednesday. It's in the lower Hudson Valley. It'll be in Westchester, in Dobbs Ferry. I'm pretty sure it's scheduled at Hudson Social, which is right on the Metro North line. You can just get right off, and it's right there. And that's going to be July 20th. So just if people are interested to be live.
Everyone, you heard it first here. There'll be Weed Wednesdays. There's an event coming up on July 26th. And you're hearing a lot about the great works that's happening at the Hudson Valley Cannabis Industry Association. I want to, close this out with one more question, Andrew and David, only because, folks will be asking, you spoke about the loaf and the pie being divided. Folks are going to say, it'd be one thing if the pie were just abstractly floating in a vacuum and we could grab a piece of it, but the pie is already in the possession of the folks who've got the capital and access here. So my question is, can you give us a sense of scale, where we are in terms of how much cannabis is being produced here now, what the sort of market is assumed to be able to maintain, so that folks can get a sense of like where they might be able to step in? Is it early? Is it too late? And that might then, kind of inspire folks to again participate and say, you know what, it's not too late. It hasn't been taken advantage of by, every sort of big buck in the town. So yeah, I'm just curious to know a little bit about that, and then we'll close it up after that.
Sure. Dave, you want to kick it off?
Sure. So while it may feel like, that only those folks with the deep pockets are in control of the pie, I'm not sure that that's the best food group analogy. But what I would say is this: New York's commitment to having the small operators, just look at what they've done with the hemp growers and the card applicants. Okay, so there's conditional licenses, and there are now over 200 hemp growers are being allowed to convert over to THC crop. Those are being planted now. So they need somebody to sell those plants by the end of the fall. So New York's created these card or conditional adult use retail dispensary licenses. They're designed for those people that have been not only arrested, but convicted under New York state law, that have since been able to operate in other areas of business that show some profitability. They're being the very first retailers outside the medical ranks to be able to sell cannabis in New York State. And not only that, the state has become a market participant to the extent it's going to build actually the first 150 storefronts as a turnkey operation for those card retailers, so that they don't have to incur the staggering costs of development and so forth just to be able to get off the ground, and they're millions of dollars in. They haven't even bought their inventory yet. So I would say that while, yes, deep pockets will always be, New York has really proven itself committed to the ideal that the small existing operators are the people who deserve to get there first. At least 150 of them will be.
And that's in relationship to what are our target numbers? Where will this industry be in 5 years?
So I don't have, I was just looking to see if I had a note on statistics. And I don't have this one at my fingertips, but we've had many conversations where we've affirmed that New York is at least unofficially the largest cannabis consuming market in the nation, probably, if not the world. Certainly when you look at it on a pro rata basis. And so the demand is actually ridiculously high compared to other jurisdictions. But the interesting thing is that New York has been so caught up in the stigma of it all that like the people that we're all going to learn who has been using cannabis for a long time, because in a couple of years it'll just kind of be normal, right? But for now, people are just starting to poke their heads up, right, and confess to the idea that you've used this thing that is actually safer and healthier for you than alcohol, which is weird. But so it's we don't have the numbers, but what we've heard, and we've heard this, and I heard this actually the other day from a conversation someone else had with a state official that at the OCM, that they're not looking to cap how many licenses. They're gonna look at supply and demand, so they're not going to flood the market. I mean, I think it was in Oregon where they didn't have any regulation on it, and then they had to burn it all because they were oversupplied. I don't think there's a huge risk of that in New York. I think we're going to be undersupplied for probably at least the first year. But you know, the short of it is, it is a limitless future. And I'm sure you've seen the billions in revenue projections that first came out when the MRTA was passed, as well as the job creation. I think it was 60,000 jobs they estimated would be created in the state. And all of that gives rise to its own new ecosystem. So my guess is that if people were just jumping in now and wanted to be part of this industry and say, I want a license in any of the categories, that there is plenty of room, and there probably will be plenty of room for a few years to come. And then, as with anything else, you know, it's not like liquor stores were first opened in the 1930s and then no more liquor stores ever opened. You know, they closed, they changed. You know, it will be a market that goes on for as long as it was before Prohibition, which turned out to have been a couple of thousand years. So.
Yeah. Well, that's encouraging. Like the idea of limitless potential and opportunity, and folks like yourselves who are working on behalf of everyone to make sure that that can be realized by different areas of the market. So thank you both for that. And everyone, please go online and follow up and see what opportunities and educational sort of meetups are happening. And Andrew, David, thank you very much for your time today. And this will be to be continued.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you for having us on.
So proud.
This is the original.
Hey, everybody, we're back.
Yes, that was wonderful.
Right, that was really cool. I like those guys. I know them for a minute, so I love to hear them speak.
I think we're
John
ready.
And Kari, you guys over there, are you good? Because we can't hear you. I don't know if they know that. Well, either way, Kari was the one who moderated that panel. He was fantastic. And actually, we are just going to jump right in to the next and the last panel for today, which is about the retail experience. A lot of people really want to apply for dispensary licenses here in New York, the first round, and then soon the inevitable round. And these are some folks that are doing that work right now. And you have an opportunity to hear from them. So here we go.
So proud.
This is the original instrumental.
All right, hello to the business of cannabis. This session is called The Retail Play. My name is Mellissa Gibson. I am from Hemp and Humanity, and I am joined with our panelists, Colin, Haythem, and Ruben, and we'll get to hear from them in just a moment. I'll just quickly say that I am a licensed New York State hemp cannabinoid retailer. I started Hemp and Humanity in 2016 with a focus on education, curation, and consultation so that we can make sure that we are providing as much information as possible for people to make educated choices with regard to getting involved with cannabinoids. And like many of you, I am eyeing the THC retail side of things in New York State as it unfolds. And like all of us, we don't have an exact roadmap yet. So as we talk about what it means to make a retail play in New York State, just know where we sit right now without all of the rules and regulations blatantly spelled out for us. But we certainly have plenty to talk about, and we're going to cover some of the challenges associated with getting involved, some of the experience that we think might make it more successful for you to do well in this space. And we have such esteemed panelists who have such varied backgrounds. And so I'm excited to talk to all of them. And what we'll do is, before we get into the questions, we'll have each of them give us a 2-minute introduction about themselves. And we'll start with Colin.
All right, thank you so much for the intro, Mellissa. Happy to be here. My name is Colin Gardner. I have over 10 years of agriculture and culinary experience. I attended the Culinary Institute of America here in New York. In 2018, I co-founded the brand Artemis with my partner. which makes Artemis is a CBD and cannabis company based here in New York. What makes us a little unique and different is that we tailor for personalized wellness, and we do this through personalized serving guides, sensory experiences. We have a chief medical advisor and a chief scientific advisor. And then we also just recently launched our home grow program, so helping educate those make and grow their own medicine at home. Thank you so much for having me here. Really looking forward to it.
Thanks so much. And Haythem, you're up.
Thank you very much, Mellissa. I do appreciate it. My name is Haythem Elgawly. I'm CEO of Med.Usa NJ LLC here in New Jersey. Actually, I just applied actually for a dispensary and consumption lounge license, which will hopefully become one of the first consumption lounges here in New Jersey. I'm really good on conceptual experiences, so I'm looking forward to bringing something totally different to this cannabis space. I have over 12 plus years experience in growing different businesses, in different spaces and industries, and throwing huge events, 300 plus events here in Jersey City. So I'm looking forward to tying all of this expertise and all of knowledge into this cannabis space and bringing something new to the table.
Excellent. Thank you. And Ruben.
Hi, Mellissa. Thank you for having me today. Ruben Lindo. I'm the CEO of Blackmar Farms and Phoenix Nutraceutical. Phoenix Nutraceutical is our CBD company that we founded in 2018, centered around research and development. And then we launched Phoenix Nutraceutical, a retail store in Saugerties, New York, during the pandemic. Unfortunately, plans didn't go as we expected. We've shifted online. But, our total experience comes from 20 plus years in the legacy market, and then about 9 years now in the adult use market, stemming from Canada all the way down to Colombia, and now we're in South Africa.
Very impressive. You can see why I told everybody that there's so much to unpack here with these great panelists. Ruben, I'm gonna start with you. I mean, everybody here, it seems like, is some sort of serial entrepreneur with extensive background in business and cannabis and other aspects of the industry. But Ruben, I wonder if you can shed a little light on, as somebody who's been involved with social equity, brand development, events production, high tech, and of course, you're a professional NFL player as well. So how do you leverage your experience as an athlete, your experience in business, and all of those into a successful track in cannabis? And do you feel like there's a certain skill set, expertise, or characteristics that someone should have if they are going to get involved and head down the retail path?
Thank you. Yeah, Mellissa. So quite the potpourri and mouthful, right? When you start thinking about the experiences that we all have, and each of the panelists have similar experiences being entrepreneurs, or else we probably wouldn't be sitting here throwing our hat into this ring, into this crazy industry. The first part of your question, really, I utilized a lot of skill sets, less business school. Coming out of NYU Stern, they don't really teach you how to run a business. They teach you in theory how to be in business or be a great employee in business, but they don't really teach you how to start and run a business. And it takes a lot of, I tell people, guts and glory. Sometimes you have to be a little bit crazy to be an entrepreneur, but taking from each of the things that I've done in my life, including playing professional sports, I've really relied on the ability to make decisions, and not just make decisions, but make decisions and stick to a path, right? I tell people all the time, if what you're interested in has a lane, stay in your lane so you don't get run over, right? It's pretty simple. This industry is so nuanced, and you can get down the rabbit hole very quickly, right? Guys who are very good at cultivating, I always hear them talk about, oh, well, what if I open a dispensary? Or women that say, oh, I'm good at creating products, but what if I start cultivating? Sometimes it transitions, and more often than not, you just get distracted from your goal, and then you lose focus, right? So I always tell people, I give the best advice. Just stay focused, stay in your lane, and pick what you're good at. for us, I'm just fortunate. A lot of people always ask me, Ruben, how do you do it all, right? How do you have a company in South Africa? How do you have a farm in California and Massachusetts and Michigan and a retail store in Saugerties, and you're looking to throw these major events? And I tell people, I built a great team. I have a very, very solid team. And that's one of the first things that I always tell people. Go through your network, because your network establishes your net worth. And those folks within your network will be your team, right? Find those who are strong in what you're weak in. And that's how you would really succeed in this industry. And you can look at anybody from burner all the way down to legacy guys, right? And they've all done the same thing. They've built really great teams around them to help bolster their brand, their name, their likeness, and their image in this industry.
Thank you. That's so important. You actually did a couple of questions in one there, and I really appreciate it. I'm going to do one quick follow-up. Given what you said, and I agree with you, there are so many elements of this industry that people can join in. It doesn't mean that everybody has to, in order to be in cannabis, not everyone has to have a dispensary. And you can be an accountant, and you can be an artist, and you can get involved, or a chef, and get involved in so many parts of the business. Why do you think that the dispensary part, the retail part, seems to be such a popular path, especially as you pointed out, for people that aren't in that lane at all and just thinking that that's where the only place that they could be successful, or the only place they want to be?
Because their experience in the industry, they're always viewing it from the end of the supply chain. It's just like anything else, right? It's like being a restaurateur, or being that accountant, right? We tend, human nature, to look toward the shiny object, right? I always say humans and ferrets were so much alike, because we always chase like little shiny things around, and dispensaries are the shiny object because it's the end of the supply chain and it's the most visible part of the supply chain. But like you said, there are so many businesses, and I know so many people who've become very successful and have never touched the plant within this cannabis industry, right? Because when you look at this industry, there's probably, for every plant touching job, there are 3 support jobs that are ancillary that don't have anything to do with the plant touching side of the business. So I think that that's kind of one of the reasons why we all get attracted to the dispensary side, and I do too, right? But then I know the business so well, I understand this industry, that it's kind of like a boat, right? It's a shiny object and everybody wants to get on it, but when it rains, you have no friends. Nobody wants to hang out with you when it's raining. And that's kind of how I view dispensaries, and that's what I always remind myself, like, it sounds sexy and it's great, but stay in your lane, Ruben, and do what you do very well. And what we do well is we create products, we cultivate, and we brand. So that's our expertise.
That's great advice. I always talk about the shiny object, that CBD is the shiny object that got everybody to accept that there are other parts of the plant. I'm a whole plant advocate. So for me, the industrial hemp side is just as important as the cannabinoid side. And so sometimes shiny objects get the attention and help build that demand. And then we can, hit them with everything else that there is to know about the plant. And yeah, for sure. And Colin, so you and I probably have the most similar set of experiences so far, being having had the pleasure of being CBD, or in my case, more of a whole hemp store, and in your case, more of a wellness location, where we spent all these years at that connection between the plant and the public. And in order to make a sale, we've had to inherently educate folks so they know what we're talking about, and also advocate. And I know that there's a few of us in New York that have been doing this for a while, pre-2018 Farm Act, which has had its own set of challenges. But I know that you and Wendy and your team have made some big decisions lately to make some significant pivots. And I personally believe that pivoting is just part of this industry. It has to happen all the time. So maybe you can talk a little bit about your decision to transition from what you have been doing to the THC side of the business. You mentioned it a little bit with the home grow, but I know there's some other things going on. And as you're sharing your own decision, if you can speak to the larger question of why you think it's so important to be able to make those changes in this industry in order to remain successful.
And thank you, Mellissa, for that question. Thank you again for having me. As a business in general, you just have to be able to pivot when things sometimes are either going the way or you see the market going in a different direction. And you just have to be able to set that change. We changed for Artemis because we always knew that the market was coming and it was something that we were looking forward to, but we wanted to come in earlier. So the CBD was allowing us to get in earlier with the passing of the Farm Bill. And eventually, once New York State legalized, like we knew it would, we would then want to pivot into the cannabis market. We just wanted to be kind of all touching of the plant, whether it be CBD, industrial that you mentioned, or the personalized wellness in the end for the end products also. We started to make that pivot probably at the beginning of this year, once we knew that the licensing was going to be coming out at the end of this year. And then once they gave the intermediate licensing out at the end of this year also too. I think that's really important as a business, is to also kind of see what you see coming in the future and then make appropriate plans to make sure that you execute those once the proper timing is there. The home grow is our first step. So that's our kind of first non-CBD product, more THC dominant that we're offering through the sale of seeds, which is really fun and exciting, and kind of the education of those programs. But we'd love to make actual cannabis products in the end also too.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And Haythem, so of all of us, since you're in New Jersey, you guys are a little bit ahead of New York, right? And so in some ways for us, we get to, sit by and see what's going to happen and make decisions. And you guys are going first in this sort of metro area. I know you've got a background in everything from global banking to fashion and lifestyle to advocacy and philanthropy. And maybe you can tell us how you're leveraging all of that to make your play for retail and why it's the path you've chosen.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question too. So I'm trying to take my past experience and expertise in all those fields and kind of implement it into this new experience with a consumption lounge. New Jersey being one of 8 states that approved consumption spaces, and Jersey City being one of, I believe, 8 or 9 cities in New Jersey that are approving it. I wanted to take advantage of that, especially hosting and producing events all across from the city for anywhere between 20 people to 4,000 people. I wanted to utilize my ability to gather a community, right, and create a safe space for certain educational events, job fairs, just a safe space for us to go talk about this flower and not feel criticized or judged or like this is something wrong that we're doing. I am a social equity candidate, so I was arrested for weed before, and I know what that's all like. So again, I wanted to create that safe space so nobody else could feel that harm, and kind of how can we work together and make sure the stigma of this flower is changed.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And I think it's amazing that you are opening the net and very wide to be as inclusive as possible. And maybe we can take this moment and maybe you can speak to why it is so important that some of these equity licenses or New York conditional licenses, why it's so important to prioritize those, and just to get your thoughts about it so people can understand.
Yeah, I come from the legacy market, so I feel like we were the first in the game, right? We've been doing this. Like, you're talking about selling cannabis here. Like, me and my friends were doing that in high school, in a sense. Like, why should we not be awarded, or should we not be praised in a sense for being first in an industry that we're seeing, people make billions of dollars in, so in a sense where who else would know this plant or flower, or know the details, or know like what's going to have the projections of what's going to happen with cannabis better than the people that have been doing this, that can tell you which strains are what, which strains are how they, and this is without being lab tested. These are consumers and people who've been in this industry, in the black market or the legacy market, that know this world. So I think it's very important that you give the people with the most knowledge of the space who didn't have the opportunity or the funds or the ability to even go through these first steps that I'm going through right now, an opportunity. And I spoke to somebody from the social inclusion, from the social equity and inclusion department in the CRC. And that's one of the main things I was talking about. I was like, you have to make it, the doors have to be wide open for this type of community to come in. These are the people probably that have made hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash that can't convert it and do the right thing because you're not making it easy for anybody to do it. So I think it's very important that we kind of put our attention and give the opportunities for people who have been doing this successfully, who have been working as a team with everybody in their realm or in their circle and executing this way before any regulators or anybody who came into space. Because besides the fact that they could probably operate a business way better than some of these CEOs, it's the speculations anybody else may have, or the different laws that we could kind of put in order and kind of just help writing is unfathomable, so.
Absolutely. And the disproportionate harm of the war on drugs to those communities. Let's make sure we mention that as well. Right. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and just ask, and this could be to any of you, just sort of raise your hand. What do we think the biggest challenge is from a consumer standpoint in retail to, you talked a little bit, Haythem, about, not only the legacy market in terms of people selling, but then there's the consumer side of that as well, right? So now we're opening up to mainstream, and you've got people that have just been conditioned to think that there's something wrong with this plant, not only something wrong, but something criminal about this plant, that are taking these baby steps. I see it in my store all the time. I'm sure, Colin, you've seen it as well, where there's still something about this, their perception of the plant that makes it difficult for them to embrace it. And maybe they can think to themselves, okay, I understand the medical side, but when we talk about the recreational side or the adult use side, what do you guys think will be the biggest challenge to really indoctrinate folks that have either been too afraid to try it, didn't know, or just don't understand, everything that this plant can do? What do those challenges look like? Haythem.
Mellissa, I just want to touch base on that. Like, stigma is a huge thing right now, right? How do you educate an entire community? One of the biggest problems that I'm having right now is my store, my proposed location. I was awarded by the planning board already that my location is deemed applicable for this type of business. One of the biggest obstacles I'm having right now is the two neighboring Catholic schools opposing my location. Okay, one of them being a university, one of them being a high school, which I'm clearly above the buffer of where, from my front door to their boundary parcel of their property. So one of the big objections I'm hearing are more moral objections, more stigma-based objections. Like, what if somebody's, using your consumption lounge and getting inebriated crossing the street, when in all reality, there's like a bar right across the street from me,
Right.
So it's trying to tell them, well, why this, but not that? They're like, well, what if your hours of operation right now are before these kids go to school? What if somebody purchases cannabis from your location and gives it to them before they go to school? Like, it's certain objections that you're like, how do you persuade somebody if they're moral objections? And it's a huge thing about the stigma, right? One of the big things that I hear right now, and the crazy myth is, well, cannabis is a gateway drug. If you're bringing it into this community around our kids, they're impressionable youths. How are you going to prevent that? How are you going to mitigate that? And like things like that. So that's what I'm kind of experiencing right now into these first steps. And I definitely wanted to share that, because that's like, this is something that is pushing us back more and more and more. It's kind of like, I thought this was supposed to be an even playing field, when in all reality, it's kind of like you trying to educate everybody all the time.
No, I appreciate that. We've had 80 years of prohibition, so it's hard for us to make up for that in like a few months.
Yeah.
And we've all seen this in New York State with the opt-in hearings or the opt-out hearings, at boards, city boards and town boards all across New York State. I mean, you're talking to the person that marches with the sign that says cannabis is the exit drug. So I definitely understand that. As a mom, I understand it. And I think that, we could do there could be an entire segment on the ways to combat each of those particular objections. So rather than going into those, let's talk about the importance of community when it comes to helping towns understand the benefits or certainly what the reality is going to be like once we're operating, and how much safer it's going to be because we have these we have regulation in place. And by the way, in this day and age, who's going to spend their money to give kids free weed before school? I don't know, but just from an inflationary standpoint, that doesn't make sense. But Ruben, you've definitely had a lot of experience in this, where I know that you are involved in your greater community. At least I can speak to the Saugerties area. I'm sure in these other places where you have businesses, you do the same thing. What can be done in terms of engaging the community to help ease the transition into adult use, so that we can make it a little bit, easier, and that we don't have these situations like Haythem's experiencing, where there's outright hypocritical and strange moral objections being thrown out there? How do we combat that, Ruben?
Well, I always say this industry is unique because we have to have educated consumers, right? So in order to have educated consumers, the full saying, and I always say this, is educated consumers make for a sophisticated marketplace, right? And the education of the consumers, really, we failed in New York, right? And this is an unpopular position because now they have the conversations with cannabis conversation. That's a year late. We're a year behind schedule, right? They didn't even do anything like that in New Jersey. That's why Haythem is running up against this. But from an industry, we have to take on the responsibility, right? And it's unfortunate that this burden is on us as industry individuals, but really it's up to us to educate the consumers. And consumers isn't just those who will pick up and purchase or frequent our stores. Educated consumers, the consumer model goes above and beyond your retail purchase or those who will stand at our point of sales, right? The education is we need to educate the pastors, right? I was fortunate. I got to start with the law enforcement and the church, right? I thought that those were the two places that if I can get them on my side, not necessarily persuade them, but get them to understand that what they're fearful of is just fear-based, which is false evidence appearing real or appearing as reality. It made it easier to get into the community because then I brought the chief of police and the pastor with me, and we sat on these panels. And if they hear it from the chief of police, whose entire career was built on chasing black and brown people to lock them up for the smell of marijuana, right? And those are his words. It makes it easier, but we have 80 years of combating to do. So the long and short answer is education, education, education. Haythem, don't stop. Don't allow them to get you to a point where you get frustrated. Always respond with educated. You can't argue educated facts. You can argue innuendo. You can argue hyperbole. You can even argue our protest points, like when we're walking down during the cannabis parade, right? And everybody's carrying big joints 10 years ago, 15 years ago, right? We have matured well beyond that in this industry, where now we have scientific data that says that this that the plant is beneficial in so many different ways that it outweighs the negative things that they can even talk about, right? But again, it all boils back to educated consumers make for a sophisticated market. We also need to continue to educate the legislators who've passed this, because now we have legislators in New York State who are using prohibitionist terms, like in the enforcement realm, and tactics in the enforcement realm. And we also need to go a step further. We really need to educate the children. And I know that that's a scary thing, right? Oh, we can't talk about weed with kids, but we need to, in your own home, in your own family, have the discussion with children that this is medicine. And you don't go to the pharmacy and buy cough syrup and drink cough syrup the same way you can't walk into a dispensary at the age of 16 and buy cannabis, right? And as a dad, I'm a dad of 4. And this was my biggest challenge, because I was a victim of the prohibition era, right? Not only did I go to prison, but beyond going to prison, I was brought up in a DARE community, the #1 DARE community, right? So playing pro sports, I was always like, weed's bad if you smoke it. But hell, weed's great because I can make an extra $3,000 a month selling weed as an athlete, right? So there was a little bit of hypocriticalness. And then when I got into the industry, my daughter was about 2 years old. But anytime she sees a cannabis plant, a leaf, right, a pot leaf on any anything, they were just in Canada last week, and she was like, "Look, everybody, it's Daddy's work," right? But it comes with education, right? I'm making light of it, but it really does. We have to educate these folks. Artemis, you do a great job with what you do in your brand. Mellissa, I've known you for a while, and the things that you do. And Haythem, just stay the course, brother. And if you need us, we're here, right?
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, I want to touch on what Ruben said too about education and what Haythem said about stigma, and that's a huge driving factor too. But what we've seen from a retail perspective is just delivering a product to a client that achieves their desired outcome or goal. And that may sound super simple, but it's so hard to do in this market when new clients are, 1, overcoming that stigma, 2, are not up to date with terms and terminology or any sort of education of the plant, and then let alone delivery methods and titration schedules of how to take the product. So it is very overwhelming to the client at first, but we don't want to scare them and have them overserved from a first-time experience and have them turned off from the very first retail experience that they have with cannabis also too.
No, thanks for adding that as well. I was thinking, Haythem, I was thinking that, you also call in for reinforcements, because there's, a bunch of us in the industry who would be happy to participate. I think we all have to band together wherever there's a need like that, because it's impossible for there to be one voice, against those other voices. And as far as Ruben, the DARE program is something I always talk about, because, when you think about it, most kids learn about drugs from law enforcement instead of in the health class. Maybe they do it in the health curriculum, but that's who's teaching, or who had been teaching everybody about drugs. And I have his permission to say this, but I have a son who wouldn't be alive if it weren't for cannabis. It's how he got through opiate addiction. And he said to me that when he realized that everything that they told him through that DARE program at school was a lie, that he thought that there were no substances that could be harmful, because they lied about the ones that he knew weren't harmful. And so he had no problems giving everything a try. So literally that education led him down that path. And so I understand that very, very well as a mom and as someone in the industry. And I also understand when people come into my store and they say, listen, I'm sober. I want to have access to this plant, but I don't want to get high. And the good news is that that's possible. There are over 130 cannabinoids in this plant that we've identified so far. There are terpenes, there are flavonoids, there are many different ways to work with this plant, topicals that don't go into your bloodstream. So I think that in the same way that CBD has kind of been the first way that people have begun to accept this plant, that there are more aspects to it than what we've been taught or what we see in media, knowing that there's so much more to this plant than just specifically the recreational aspect, but not vilifying that either, because there's nothing wrong with getting into a creative space and feeling good. We do so many things to feel good. So why not this as well? So there's so much to tackle. And Colin, I'm just going to bring this back to you because I understand how hard it is when you've got, it's one thing, at an event like Haythem puts together, or some of the roundtable discussions that Ruben puts together. But if you and I are sitting in our store and we have about 2 minutes or less to educate someone about the endocannabinoid system, terpenes, cannabinoids, also that someone is an educated consumer, as Ruben pointed out, so that they can make a sophisticated choice, it's a little challenging. Can you speak a little bit to, how you guys accomplish that?
Yeah, we usually spend about 30 minutes per client, and it's a lot of times we just start talking about plant medicine in general, and then we start talking about cannabis, such as we always want to know what your desired outcome or goal is, but then how, like, different delivery methods that you can do to get there. Some delivery methods have longer onsets or faster onsets. Each person is very unique and different. So we talk about titration and also serving size. And there's so many different products, as you had mentioned. There's CBD isolate products with no THC, so you won't feel any sort of psychotropic effects of the product. And there's so many different products in the marketplace. And I want to touch on the topic of just not, when you develop and make product and a brand also too, think about what that client is going to experience when they take your product and what sort of challenges that they're going through when they first enter a retail experience. They may not be an everyday consumer, so their tolerance level is very low. And some of the products that have, California released like 1,000 milligram THC products when they first opened up, and it got some people in a world of issues also too. So properly suggesting as a bud tender products to your client, and then straying away from sort of lazy marketing terms such as like indica and sativa. And what I mean by that is, like, have scientific reference to the terms that you're using, and make sure that when you develop a product, it is going to achieve that outcome or goal, because each person is very unique and different, and how they experience one type of cultivar will be different than the next person. So I think educating your clientele, telling them that it's going to take a process, and to at least trust the process that you're giving them, is really important also too.
I think that's great. Haythem, with your events and with your plans moving forward, are you going to be taking a strong sort of lifestyle perspective with what it is that you're doing and incorporating that into? Can you speak a little bit about that aspect of retail?
Yeah, absolutely. So my brand is more lifestyle brand. So I wanted to create something called Med.Usa or Med.Usa. Okay, so it's going to tell the tale of this beautiful priestess who was ravished in Athena's temple and shunned to the edge of the world, where whenever you looked in her eyes, you turned into stone. Just like the cannabis flower was a beautiful flower used by hundreds of civilizations, until the war on drugs changed that stigma into a drug. And now anytime you smoked it, you got stoned, right? So Med.Usa, stoned at first sight. So I want to create that lifestyle where it's like, it's okay to consume cannabis. We consume cannabis for XYZ, for these reasons that, that Colin was saying, we're going to try to decipher once you walk into these doors. And create a community that's accepting of this, and driving that experience all the way to, like, what's the difference between this and the sneaker store that I created, or the clothing lifestyle store that I created, or what's the difference between this person and that person, in a sense, So I do want to tell that story and drive that tale home.
That's great. And that's so important for brand differentiation, for people to have a reason to think of that brand, whether it's the brand on the shelf or the branding of the retail establishment itself. It's very important because in the beginning, when there's not too many options, I think that just demand is going to drive people to the retail shops. But as the market continues to grow, the opportunity to narrow the definition, create a niche becomes even bigger. Ruben, I'm going to direct this next question to you, considering we're both Hudson Valleyers. What do you think, there have been so many wonderful opportunities in the city, in sort of the more metropolitan areas, to talk about this plant, great educational events. What do you think is unique about the Mid-Hudson Valley area in terms of how this industry is going to grow? And what do you really see for us here?
So thank you, Mellissa. Interesting to say that. I also host an event here in the Hudson Valley. Last year we had Steve D'Angelo. This year we have some hidden surprises, and I won't announce it yet. We're finalizing. But August 20th, we throw an event here in the Hudson Valley. And the reason why is I always said that the business of cannabis will be done outside of the city limits, right? For instance, walk through New York City and find me an apple farm, right? You don't. There's no room for it. It's very expensive to get space to build cultivation facilities. Here in the Hudson Valley, right along the river, we have all of these defunct factories and all of these things that, I would consider we are almost post-industrial revolution Rust Belt in the Hudson Valley. So from the Hudson Valley all the way up 87 and then all the way far west is Erie, Pennsylvania on I-90. But right here in the Hudson Valley, we have a unique opportunity because we can reach 5 states within an hour and 40 minutes. We can reach over 3 million people in the Hudson Valley, and then we can expand that to 6 million people in the New York metropolitan area, New York, New Jersey. So I feel that in the Hudson Valley, we're centrally located, and then we have the 2 biggest thoroughfares. We have I-90 and I-87 that come together. We have I-95 in the Hudson Valley, and we have I-84, right? So that's it. This is the crossroads. This could be the crossroads of cannabis transitioning and moving cannabis, like the cannabis superhighway. Back in my former life, they used to call the Palisades Parkway Cocaine Highway, right? Because it was limited police, and you can get from Washington Heights up to upstate New York, during that era without really too much hassle. This is very similar to that. We can move cannabis to contiguous states within an hour and 40 minutes. I mean, you want to talk about building an industry? Once New York wakes up and the other surrounding states wake up and they realize that contiguous states will increase our revenue pool and their tax revenue, just like they did with the Port Authority. Think about that. Right here in the Hudson Valley, we could be in Massachusetts in 40 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. I can be in Pennsylvania in an hour. I can be in New York City in an hour and 30 minutes. I can be in Jersey in an hour and 20 minutes, right? I mean, we can go anywhere. And then forget about it. Once you get into New England, I mean, I can be in Vermont in 2 hours. I mean, I can be in Vermont in an hour. I can be in Maine, all the way up to Maine within 2 hours, right? I can be at the border of these states. So I'm excited. I think that with all of our farmland and our agricultural experiences and the rich culture here in the Hudson Valley, I mean, you want to talk social equity? Sojourner Truth was sworn a free slave in Kingston, New York, right on Wall Street. So I mean, it's the embodiment of the entire movement. We always get overlooked in the Hudson Valley because New York is the cannabis consumption capital. Mm-hmm. But I think we can make the Hudson Valley the business of cannabis capital of the world, truthfully.
I couldn't agree with you more. We had an event a couple weeks ago with about 160 folks here in the Hudson Valley in the cannabis industry who want to get in the cannabis industry. And we talked about the fact that some of those other events, which are awesome, happen late at night where you can catch an Uber home or you can use public transportation. And here, when we have these events, you need to be a little bit earlier. We need to be able to drive about an hour there or an hour back, but we can do it. We're known for our natural resources. I personally think the cannabis tourism industry is going to be huge in the Hudson Valley. And in addition, you know, we don't have this opportunity to sort of bump into each other on the street. And so we do have to be very deliberate and specific about getting together. And I invite everybody who is listening to this presentation to think about ways that you feel like you can plug into the industry, whether it's in retail, like we were discussing today, or all the elements of the supply chain from growing to consumption and everywhere in between. And I think that you would find that most of us in the industry are looking to bring others into the industry. We're open, we're friendly, we have some experience, we're willing to share, because we know that it's the work of a collaboration, or in some cases collaboration, for those of us that might be competing with someone down the road. It's not us versus each other. It's us versus the Targets and the Walmarts and the RJ Reynolds of the world. We really need to be very specific and deliberate about protecting what makes our place so special. Craft brands, craft businesses, small businesses, advocacy, equity, it's all of those things. And I'm so glad that you guys joined me today. This was excellent. Thank you for your contribution to this panel and to the industry and to everything that's happening. And so much of it is because of you guys. And I really appreciate it. And thanks so much for joining us, really.
Thank you.
Bye, Ruben. Bye, Colin. Bye, Haythem.
Bye. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Fossil God.
This is the original instrumental.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. Johnny, you back? Is your audio better? I don't hear you. Oh, you're actually muted. So
Yes.
your computer is muted. I think it's by your actual laptop, maybe. Yeah, I think that's because I want them to wrap it up. Because we did good today. We went only a little over. Okay, we should be able to hear you now. Still cannot hear you.
I think we'll have to wrap it up, Tanya.
I think we'll have to wrap it up. You're muted. You're unmuted. You're muted. Listen, either way, I think we had a really fantastic day today. It was a full circle cannabis education. I know this is geared towards folks in the Hudson Valley. Are you there now? Hello?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Let me get rid of the other you. Just let's wrap it up from where you are, John. You're there. Let's do it.
All right, there we go.
All right, let's wrap it up.
Yes. Well, listen, before we wrap it up, I thought that was a great panel, but we have to thank a couple of people. Avalon Bungie, who was, you guys haven't seen her on camera, but she's been behind the scenes sending out all the communications. So we really want to give her a shout out and thank you. She's with the Hudson Valley Agribusiness Development Group. And Kyrie, who's not on camera, but he's been extremely helpful. And this is his studio we're operating from. And sorry for the technical difficulties. We've had some storms moving through the Hudson Valley, and it's just knocked stuff all out. But,
downstate too, it's pretty bad today. I was worried about our connection today, but we did good.
Yeah. Oh, I'm looking into the wrong camera here now. Okay, there we go. Oh my God, this is so crazy. This has been a long 2 days.
Yes. But I think anyone watching, and remember, there is a replay from day one. Don't forget to go back. There was some really great information on the first installment as well. And I'm gonna wrap up. I am Tanya from Women Grow. It was a pleasure to be here today and last week. And please follow us at Women Grow and connect with me, Tanya, at Women Grow, if you'd like to reach out.
Great. And it was great to see you, Tanya. And I'm Rihanna Young, founder of Happy Hound CBD. And I was just happy to be here and learning and growing with all of you.
Thanks for being here.
Right. And I'm John Gilstrap from Awaken.Space. And if you guys are looking for any consulting on how to get your cannabis business off the ground and your digital media and financing, give me a shout at Awaken.Space. And also the Discord server where you can find us is Sativa, but the T is a 7. So check us out. And thanks again.
All right, everybody. Have a great one. And we are out. Take good care.
Fossil production.